remind everyone that ModGov has had a modification over the last week. This committee has changed its name. So consequently, if those of you that in your ModGov have got the children and families scrutiny ticked, you will find that the papers for this meeting aren't showing on your devices. So in ModGov, for those that don't know, top right-hand corner, I believe there's a cog. Press the cog and then you can go down and it says select the committees you're interested in. And if you click that and scroll down, you'll find children and education scrutiny. It is there now. So, but the other thing you'll need to do for those of you that haven't already done so is either refresh your ModGov, because you need to tell it that you want it to work, if you see what I mean, before. So that's giving you something to do while I do the opening elements for today's meeting. Members, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. This is a special meeting with an unusually single item agenda. We'll talk about that as we go through. So I'll just go through the bits. So just I'm checking, making sure everyone can hear us online. People can see my lips moving, so I'm assuming that they do. Thank you very much. The agenda pack is published on ModGov. I've explained about that and the website. As always, please, if you we will try very hard to get through the presentation without stopping for questions. But obviously, if a question comes to mind, make a note of it, indicate now, and my vice chair and myself will pick that up. Speaking about the vice chair and myself, you may have, those of you that come to our committee meeting on a regular basis may notice my vice chair has changed. At full council last week, I'm pleased to say that all the training I was able to give to our vice chair has resulted in promotion. And Evie, congratulations on your elevation, and we look forward to working with you directly, specifically because I believe one of your job titles is SEND. So this item is prevalent to you, and I'd like to welcome Councillor Stanton, Mike Stanton, as my new vice chair. We've already met, we've had some contact, and I can honestly say that my vice chair I look forward to working with, because he's hit the ground running, particularly with his first meeting being something as pivotal as this. So thank you, Mike, for your efforts, and I look forward to working with you. Okay, this meeting will be audio recorded by council, as always. Obviously, as we talked about agendas being published online, please, when you do speak, if you're speaking to a specific point, try and find the page number in the ModGov document so that we can make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. And housekeeping, for those of you that were in early like I was, you would have heard the fire alarm tested this morning. There are no further tests, I'm aware, so if the alarm sounds, please follow our Democratic Services officers as required. I think that's everything. So before I go on to the main body of the meeting, I just have a couple of more things to do. So I'd like to take this opportunity to my right and your left. We've been joined by one of our new cooperative members, Chris. Welcome along. Hopefully, Chris has joined us for some of our meetings online. He's come as a governor co-optee, so hopefully that will bring a great deal to us. And obviously, with today's meeting, there's a lot of information there. Right. I think that's all the preamble done. Am I okay, Jack? So we move on. Okay, item number 1 of our agenda is apologies for absence. Jack.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. We have received apologies from Councillor Martin Lovell, and we have Councillor Henry Hobhouse as his substitute, Councillor Jenny Snell, and we have Councillor Emily Pellstone as her substitute, and also an apology from Councillor Peter Clayton.
Thank you for that. Are there any other apologies? Thank you very much. Moving on then, agenda item 2 is the declarations of interest. Members are asked to declare any additional declarations of interest that are relevant to today's papers only, apart from those that obviously that are recorded online. There being none, we move on. Item 3 of our agenda is public question times. I'm not aware of any public questions. So as such, we can move on. Okay. Right, agenda item 4, which is our main item of the meeting today. Papers have been circulated. They are extensive. And I've also feel it's important just to mention the fact, obviously, as a scrutiny committee, our purpose today is to review the papers and make potentially any recommendations to executive for them to consider when they are taking their decisions. What I will say, members, is I acknowledge the fact that this paper is massive. The area is massive, and we may not be able to drill down into the minutiae, but I would see this, and I hope that executive will see this as the start of a journey, as opposed to or the start of the next stage of a journey, as opposed to being. We won't be able to scrutinise everything today. What we hope we'll be able to do is to look at it at a strategic high level and advise the executive, but then with the view to, as things go forward, picking up the bits that are happening. One of the things that we talked about committee and we highlighted when we looked at the DMP, the deficit management plan, was the fact that it was big and we wouldn't be able to necessarily scrutinise each of the elements as we go. What I will say is I think one of the things that will come out of today is the fact that as we go forward, as issues become aware and and obvious to us and reported, we can then go back and review things as we go. This decision is a strategic one that will be taken by executive or by the lead members for executive. So again, similar to the development management plan, they're the one, they own this, and it's a matter of us to hold it into account. I think that's reasonable. We're going to have a presentation, and once we finish the presentation, we'll then go into some questions. And hopefully, I have to remind you all that we need to be in a position, maybe, of making some recommendations to executive based on the conversations that we have today, or not, as the case may be. I think that's it. Heather, are you introducing?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed I am. And you've laid out a lot of the good groundwork, so I'll try not to say anything you've already said, if that's possible. Absolutely right. We're here today to get that feedback on the SEND reform plan. And I just wanted to say there are two things that the SEND reform plan does. Obviously, one is about laying the foundations for the way we are going to approach the requirements of the government white paper and how we're going to improve our SEND delivery in our partnership in Somerset. But of course, it also is here to give assurance to the government as to their thoughts and feelings about awarding us the high need stability grant, which they announced very recently to say that they would be prepared on receipt of an acceptable plan to ensure that we would get up to 90% of our accumulated deficit paid to us as a grant. And that was the deficit as at the end of March. This year. So for all kinds of reasons, this is incredibly important, not just for helping us with our current financial situation as a council, but also looking forward as to how we support children and our families going forward in the most productive and efficient way. So, and I think you've also alluded to the fact, Chair, that the timescales have been incredibly tight throughout. We only really got formal notification of this in early March, and we had to have the formal submission done by the 19th of June. I think we've benefited from being able to give a kind of interim snapshot in time of where the plan is to the government, so they can nudge us back on course if they think we could be formatting it differently or putting different content in. And I'm sure we'll talk about that today. But we have literally only got the feedback in a matter of days ago. I think another point to make, which I think you've already touched on, is this has to be created, owned and delivered by the entire system as a plan. So it kind of sits with us, and we have probably the most riding on it in some respects financially. But actually, we always have to remember this is a system-wide plan and a system-wide service. And I'm very grateful to see already, I haven't had a chance to check who's on the call, but I know our partners are with us today. And so, we've been working with the ICB, with the NHS Trust, with schools, and with families and groups who represent families to get everybody's thoughts and considerations into this plan. So it's really important to understand that one. And I think today, and again, you said this, Chair, so I'm going to shut up in a second because I think you make it very clearly every time. The purpose of bringing it here, and it has to go through, it has to be signed off by our partners as well. There's a lot of governance around this, but the purpose of bringing it here today is really so that we can get your feedback on it, so that when we do make that decision tomorrow, and you see what the paper is going to be, they're all in the pack, that when executive makes a decision tomorrow about taking it forward, we've had every bit of information that we possibly can have. We were informed.
I believe you meet Wednesday.
Oh, did I say Wednesday?
You said tomorrow. It's
I tell you what, it feels like tomorrow, even doing it as Wednesday. So forgive me. But when it comes to when it comes to actually considering this executive, we have to be assured that we have been as informed as possible to make that decision. So I'm really grateful for the time you're going to spend here and giving us your thoughts. So that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you for welcoming Evie as well. I didn't have to do that. I'm going to hand over to Amelia now, and she can take us through the actual, as you say, huge plan and the overview of it.
Thank you, Heather. And I'm actually going to hand over to Hazel Malcolm, who is here from the ICB. She is online. She's going to introduce this. This is a partnership plan. So Hazel will kick us off. She'll then hand over to me. And I'm very pleased that we have Ruth Hobbs on the other side of the desk for a change, who will also be contributing to this overview. So Hazel, can I hand over to you?
Yes, hi Amelia, and thanks everyone for having this extraordinary meeting for us to go through the plan with you. Next slide, please, Andrew. So I'm just going to give, I'm not going to read through each of the items on the slide, but clearly the purpose of this session is, as already been stated, is to outline what our SEND reform plan is for Somerset and to provide you with the assurance that's required to get it approved. We're also looking to demonstrate how we're aligning the work in this plan with the wider developments across the partnership. There's lots of exciting things happening within the children and young people's arena, and we want to ensure that you've got the assurance that we're aligning those things together. Also, we want to ensure that you're informed about our rationale, our priorities, as well as our risk and opportunities. Just to give you the assurance that this presentation won't be going on for too long, we're going to look to do it in under 45 minutes. And at the end of that, as already been stated, we're happy to take any questions. So next slide, please, Andrew. So Amelia, I'm sure you all know about Amelia. I'm Hazel Malcolm. I'm the Associate Director of Commissioning with the Portfolio for Women and Children's Services across ICB. As already been mentioned, Ruth Hobbs is there from Somerset Parent Care Forum, and Camilla is with us as well. Camilla is my colleague, and she's the DCO for SEND within Somerset. So next slide, please. So as already been stated, we've been given quite a challenging task a few weeks ago to develop this plan and get it submitted by the 4th of June. So this is something each local authority has been asked to do within a very tight time scale. And it's been quite a challenging experience, but it's been a learning experience as we've been able to sort of debate and review where we are with SEND within Somerset. So this has involved bringing the team together across the partnership to build on our range of expertise and intelligence. So we've been asked to do the theory of change to ensure that we deliver value for money, that we've got clear milestones for the next 3 years, that we've been doing this based on consultation and co-production, which we have done, and we're addressing the 3 key areas about the capital, experts at hand and partnership. So I'm just going to give a bit of a flavour, and then further on in the presentation, Amelia will be outlining the detail of the plan, and Ruth will be outlining how we've been working together. So next slide, please. So this is a team that we've been meeting on a weekly basis. That team has been about bringing together those experts around programme management, clinical understanding, finance, programme management. And we've also been working outside of this team with our colleagues in schools, further education settings, SFT, but also with all our other colleagues across the ICB newly formed cluster to make sure there's alignment, that we're sharing expertise, knowledge and good practice. So hopefully that will give you the confidence that we've had a range of partners involved in the process. Next slide, please. So we have been working on a very tight timescale. As you can see here, we've got some local decision-making deadlines that we need to meet. We're now on the 1st of January with this extraordinary scrutiny meeting. Over the next week, we'll be going to our various boards within the ICB and the councils to get it submitted on the 19th of June. So we really would value your input and questions and feedback at this stage. Next slide, please. So as already been stated, it's quite a challenging process to put this plan together, and there are quite a few key components which we've had to develop to contribute to the plan, but also to enhance how we're going to shape the future of the SND programme, the SEND programme across Somerset. So year one, we are operating in a challenging times for all partners, whether that's finance, wider policy changes, demographic changes, that are going to impact on our services. So this slide really just recognises that this is a long-term plan. And whilst we're focusing on the first 3 years, they should really be laying the foundation for a revised SEND programme in the longer term future. So year one, as you can see from this slide, is really about building those building blocks. And again, we'll pick on some of this further on in the presentation. But those building blocks are around ensuring that we've got good programme management in place, that the plan is financially sustainable, and that means ensuring that we're basing our decision making on our evidence and our data and our projections, that we are looking at how we can develop workforce around the experts at hand, and that involves working with our local authorities and our ICB colleagues and the voluntary sector to make sure that we've got a robust plan to develop the skills to make sure that we are giving families and children a wide menu of opportunities and that and a degree of flexibility, and that we've got strong governance and partnership arrangements in place, and that finally that we've got process in place to monitor and evaluate, because clearly things are going to change and we need to make sure that we're on track. So the whole purpose of the year one isn't to have it complete, but it's about ensuring that we can demonstrate that we've got a good grasp of our plan and that we are delivering outcomes and impacts for children and young people and making a real difference to this population cohort. So the next slide, please. So there are a range of opportunities which we've identified. Obviously, it's about having a sustainable SEND programme. It's about developing our experts at hands funding, and this is going to be really key in terms of enhancing our early intervention and prevention model, ensuring that families have access to the right skills in the right place, and that as a team of professionals we're working together around that cohort of SEND children, and that we have a platform in which we can continue to develop SEND improvements and transformation, again building on good practice, utilising our skills, being aware of what are the key components within Somerset that we need to be flexible, and also building on that neighbourhood model which both the council and the ICB are moving towards. There are also a range of risks which some have already been highlighted. The key one is about the timescales. We've got a very tight timescale not only to deliver this plan but also to deliver that year one programme. So I would just ask you to think about that and how that is going to impact on us working together. Unfortunately, we haven't received the guidance yet around our expert at hands. We've been advised to continue to progress our expert at hand model while we await the guidance. So we are sort of doing this based on our existing knowledge and our existing experience of doing SEND for several years. We're reaching our partnership consensus. Obviously, there are lots of partners that need to be involved in this, not only the strategic partners, but our operational partners. And again, the timescale has made that very difficult around getting everyone on board. And there are issues, there are risks around the capacity and workforce. So clearly, we may need to go out to procurement to secure new services. We'll need to adapt, train and support the workforce going forward. And there are risks about having the capacity to recruit and retain staff to enable us to deliver the programme within the first year. Next slide, please. So hopefully that's given you an overview of what's going to come in this presentation and a bit of an overview around the wider SEND reforms. So I'll hand over to Amelia, who's going to give you much more detail about the SEND reform plan. So over to you, Amelia.
Thank you, Hazel. Much appreciated. So I just want to spend a little bit of time focusing on the challenge and why we need a SEND reform plan at all. And I think it's really important that we have a shared understanding of what is happening on the ground. We've spent a lot of time preparing for inspection as well as preparing this plan. We are overdue for inspection. And one of the things that has come through in our conversations with professionals from across the front line is that there is one overriding issue that is facing all organisations, which is demand. And demand is a tidy bureaucratic word, and perhaps need is a better word. And in many cases, I think crisis is an even better one. At this moment in time, we have around 1,000 EHCPs awaiting assessment. Waiting times are coming down slightly, but it should be 20 weeks, and we're in well over 45. That's more than twice as long. The wait for autism diagnosis is now over 3 years long. Our virtual school has around 2,500 children who are we have identified as being at risk at the highest level. And I'll say more about this children. There's a larger group we're concerned about. Our prevention teams have a waiting list. We have over 2,300 children who are electively home educated. A significant portion of those children are not there by choice. We have recently had to speak to a secondary school who is issuing template letters to parents to ask them, parents to remove their children voluntarily. We have 1,900 children who are severely absent. Severe absence means that the child has missed more than half of the school year. Many of those children will have missed more than half of the school year. That is almost 2,000 children in Somerset right now. These numbers are huge. And when we look at our overall cohort, we have 15,000 children who are SEND support. We have now 6,500 children with education healthcare plans. The numbers we are talking about are huge, absolutely huge. We move on. Now, if we ask some questions about why this is happening, to be honest, we don't know. And it's not just in Somerset, this is happening around the world, and nobody knows why. But the need that is escalating at a terrifying rate. And if you read the government documentation, it is absolutely silent on any hypothesis as to why this is. If you look at our overall numbers, you can see that 15,000 is broadly flat. It has grown. We're from over the 7-year period, you can see it's moving from around 13% to over 14%, but that's relatively small. But if you look at the top, we're seeing there is we were a low statementing authority. When the SEND reforms came in 2014, we were very low. It crept up. We were at 1.8 at the beginning of the 7-year period. We're now about national. And see the number of plans that this organization is now supporting has tripled. If you go to the next slide. The most critical thing, and I think it's just really important to dwell on this, and we talk to schools, there is a dime drop moment often, I think, when they recognize this. And I would say, and we've got Swabic in the room, the chart that I have for special schools looks very similar. The one that I have for further education colleges also. So this is across all types of school and all all ages of children. On the far left-hand side, where you see something disappearing, we used to have about 20% of our children in mainstream schools who are at band 1. Band 1 basically no longer exists. Nobody bothers to apply for an EHCP for band 1. What is band 1? Band 1 is the lowest level of support. Schools are just now absorbing that with no funding. Where you've seen absolutely stratospheric growth is what we would call band 4. And also you can see huge growth, particularly in the last few years, in band 5. Band 4 and 5 are overwhelmingly children with neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, social, emotional, mental health, speech, language, communication. All of these things are interconnected Venns. 7 years ago, we had 20% of children in band 4. We are now almost 50%. And if you look at that normal curve of distribution in terms of children in mainstream schools, you could go to a school not far from here, a special school that had that distribution 10 years ago. Which means that what schools are being asked to do now is what our special schools did a decade ago. But they have been given no more funding, no additional support, no additional training, no additional staff. And so when people ask, why is the high needs budget overspent? It's because of that. It's because these are children, quite often, with a very high level of need. And in particular, There are children, as I say in a moment, who are experiencing what we describe as dysregulation. And our band 5 children, we are building SEND units now, inclusion bases in new parlance, and those are for children at band 5 who cannot be taught in a mainstream classroom quite often because their curriculum level may be below the national curriculum, or we can only be taught in a class of up to 6 to 8 children. Next slide. So apologies, this looks messy, but the key message of this is it is messy. And there is an interconnected web of things that are happening that stem from a single cause. And that cause is what we call dysregulation. It's a technical term, but you will recognize it. We've sometimes talked about it before in this committee, but you will recognize it if you've ever known a 2-year-old. And that's not because these children are 2 years old, but it is because it is something that children without need or disabilities will develop as they age, and it is ability to regulate your emotional state and your resultant behavior. And there are 2 forms of that. There's internalized and externalized dysregulation. And children who internalize their distress, and sometimes that distress is acute, will go in. And what we see manifesting is children withdrawing from school, quite often withdrawing from society, quite often returning to, retreating to their bedrooms, children who have not been out of their bedroom for 6 months or more. You see children who are self-harming, who are in acute distress. We have seen suicides. For children who have externalized dysregulation, they take it out. You see aggression in the home, you see aggression in the school, and a disruptive behavior. And what you see in the system, and you will know that we're one of the highest excluding and suspending local authorities in the country, is that they get excluded. We've been, one of the things coming from, you'll remember the recent joint thematic area inspection, making a connection between exclusion and serious youth violence and exploitation. You see children being taken into care. We have the highest, we have significantly above the national average in terms of the proportion of children who are looked after, who have an education healthcare plan. We have huge waits for diagnosis because parents don't know what else to do. We have huge waits for education healthcare plans because they desperately need help. And we have pressure everywhere because there is not enough to go around from the volume of distress that is being experienced by children. Go to the next one. So effectively what we're saying, if you draw that together, demand is rising sharply, but that is a soft word for really quite distressing situations. And we have regularly schools reporting, and Swabik will be aware of this, the externalized dysregulation. We would talk to our trade unions about it all the time in terms of violence to staff. And regularly reporting incidents because of violence to staff. That is not a child's fault, but it is creates acute pressures in the school system in terms of ability to recruit for obvious reasons, and result in impact on quality of education when no one will do the job. And so when we talk about higher levels of unmet need, children have underlying conditions that is manifesting in dysregulation with incredibly serious consequences across the board. Next slide. So our vision and goal, and we've taken this, this is the same vision and goal that we had in the original SEND strategy, which is coming to an end, but it is, I think, very apposite in terms of this situation. Adults and children, parent carers and children have told us that they want to be able to move through the world without having to force their way through it. And when we look at the level of distress that children are manifesting and the way that they are trying to tell us how hard their life is, I think that's a very appropriate vision and goal.
So thank you very much. And just to introduce myself, councillors and colleagues, my name is Rowan Griffin. I am interim here. I'm the interim SEND programme lead. So I've been working behind the scenes, supporting Amelia, Claire, Ruth, Hazel, on pulling this this massive feat together and where we are. And I just want to start by saying, as somebody who works in councils across the country on these types of things, not just SEND, across children's services, sometimes other parts of the council as well. The timescales for this have been extremely tight. This is one of the busiest contracts I've ever experienced, you know, with the shortest timescales, hence the amount of information that you have received today. So I just want to acknowledge that by you know, just how hard everyone around us have been working on this for over the last 2 months. So vision and goal. So we already have a SEND strategy, and at some point that will be updated and renewed. But it's not needed for that. It's not needed for this. But as part of that, children and parents and carers have moved through the world without having to force our way through it, and that was a key part of the strategy, and therefore it's a key part of this SEND reform plan. And it's to better, and what are our goals? And it's to better support children with SEND, so fewer are looked after, self-harming, not attending mainstream education due to a number of different vulnerability factors. You've got education other than at school, section 19, part-time timetable, elected home education, exclusion needs. So all of these challenges that media was talking about. Just as we're going through this also, just please bear in mind, my background is a generalist program change manager. So my level of knowledge of SEND is middling rather than expert. So but Ruth here is an expert in this area. So we will do a double act on all of these things. Is there anything on the goals you think that's really important from a less generalist perspective to add?
So I think it's really important for Scrutiny to understand that when we talk about elective home education, for example, we have a significant number of children at home that I would say are not elective. Families have felt that they've got no choice but to home educate due to needs not being met within a school environment. So we just need to bear that in mind, and also how all of these are interlinked. So, for example, when we start talking around children that are unable to attend mainstream education for a variety of vulnerabilities there, that then can lead to the other ones. So you can imagine if you have been excluded from school on multiple occasions, your view of yourself, your self-worth will be impacted by that. That then links into 2 around the self-harming, and unfortunately also links into children going into care. So those interdependencies are really critical, and that's why we've picked those 3 areas to really focus on, because those are the ones that are having the biggest impact on children, young people and families currently. I mentioned at the last scrutiny that there is a lot of conversations happening around on social media about invoking section 20, which is where a parent hands their child back to the local authority and says, I cannot cope anymore. So we are at a point where actually a lot of our parents are going into crisis, and that's why we've focused on these areas as the goals for this plan.
And thank you. And health colleagues, Camilla and Hazel, anything you'd like to add? So if we can achieve these goals, then the consequences will be higher educational achievement, better attendance in mainstream provision, which will be really important, reduction in negative family input and impact, and reduction in costs, which has obviously been a key thing that we have been discussing through the DMP previously as well. So, absolutely central to this vision and goal is mainstream inclusion. This is that inclusion by default, making sure that the children can stay in those placements. So this is a chart which basically describes why unmet needs arise, and therefore the consequence of that is emotional dysregulation. And so what the media is describing here is, and what we as a team are describing here is, what are the drivers? It's things like so how can we so the opposite, my apologies, this one is actually about how do we regulate. So if we have certain things in place, this will enable children to stay in mainstream settings without experiencing unmet need and through emotional regulation. So things like, just to give you a few examples, well-planned transitions between different stages at school, and also preschool and post-16 as well. Ensuring that healthcare needs are met. Another one, positive well-being. The relationship with parent carers. So just to give you a flavour of some of those, and these things will, if we can get these things in place, they can be enabled by a number of different activities, which are the enablers here. And then this then leads to our programme, and our programme of activity, the different things that will help deliver these things to happen. So this is basically just saying, look, it's really complicated, but there's a link, but we're trying to make that logical link back to how do we get a programme of a practical programme of activity to deliver these things and affect the change, ensure that needs are met and that children feel regulated at settings in school. Anything further on that one, given it's quite specialist?
Absolutely, and I think what it is saying that some of these things are things that are happening outside of the SEND reforms.
Forgive me, would you introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, you need to get really close with these. Okay. Sorry. So my name's Camilla Hutchings. I am the designated clinical officer for SEND, working in NHS Somerset. Apologies. Yeah, and just to add to what Rowan was saying is that some of these programme elements are things that are happening outside the SEND reforms. Some of them are happening within them, things like the experts at hand, and it's bringing all of those things together to sort of tackle those really wicked, complex problems that not one thing is going to solve.
Yeah, and I'll come in on this one if that's okay as well. So I think we talk a lot in Scrutiny around wanting children to be happy and wanting them to thrive and wanting them to get their best outcomes. And what we've tried to do is look at actually what some of the barriers that are in place now, what needs to change, so what do we need to have in place, what would enable that to happen, and then how does that link into the programme and how that's going to work. And as Camilla said, things like Best Starting Life, Families First, all of those initiatives need to work together. Children don't fit into one little box, so if our children have SEND, that doesn't mean that they don't have anything else going on at the end of the day. So it's about how does everything interlink and work together, and that's been the biggest challenge I think for us as part of the programme, is trying to understand what are the different parts of the system that need to come together and work together to make sure that we don't have children that are falling through any gaps.
Thank you very much. So Andrew, if we could just go on to our priorities, if that's all right. So just to make members aware, over the last week since we this is developing all the time because of the timescales and how and the structure. So there's been a lot of work talking within the last few days, talking with the Department for Education, learning from other areas and how they are and how they are doing it, but making sure that we have plans that are appropriate for Somerset as well. So with that in mind, you won't have seen this, and it's quite detailed, but this is basically. There are 4 building blocks which the Department for Education require the SEND reform plans have, and if you've seen the guidance, it talks about that. And the 4 building blocks. So I just mentioned that I won't go into all the detail of this, but this is like a visual summary of what it is we're trying to achieve here. So there's four areas specified by the Department for Education: strengthening inclusion across education settings. And so that's very much about the practice of. So in terms I would understand, it's about the practice. It's about how do we actually make inclusion happen through our practice. Then we have systems leadership. So that's and collaboration and co-production. So that's working together in partnership, working together multi-agency, ensuring that the voice of children and young people and parents are throughout what we do. And then we have access to specialist support and local placements. So that's all the work that you'll be more familiar with because it's very well established, with the work that Phil Kurd and team have been doing on sufficiency, SEND units, resource bases, ensuring that there is the local provision there to keep children and young people in mainstream provision. And encouraging inclusive culture and behaviours. So this one is a slightly misleading. And when I first saw this, I thought, okay, 2 and 4 sound quite similar. Basically, the difference between 2 and 4 is 2 is about partnership work and co-production. 4 is about encouraging, is about that shared accountability. That it's about joint commissioning, etc. And that's not that well established here. So you know, it's something we've got a lot to do. Then from this, the group have identified 10 different workstream areas: consistency, positivity, modelling, locality, co-production. As you can see those there. And then we have lots of different projects. Now, just not to worry you too much about this, there's all these projects ongoing. Not all of these are new projects. It's not like every single project is going to have a project manager and a project team in a big industry. So this is stuff that's, as colleagues were saying, is already ongoing. Not always, some of it is the DMP as well, and a variety of different things. So this basically summarises what it is we're going to be doing on a page at the moment. So Andrew, I'm just thinking, does this?
I think, pause for a second, Rowan.
Sure, of course.
Heather.
Yes, thank you. I realise, you know, when we've been living and breathing some of these diagrams for some time, they land very strangely for people when you see them first off. But I think this one is a really helpful one, because if you think, we have the service has anyway for some time now, a couple of years, been working through a series of or developing a transformation for the entire children and family service. Some on the social care side, some on the SEND side, and actually what you're seeing here is our attempts to say, these are all the things that we are working on already. But of course, the government said, please arrange it in this order and under these themes. So some of the themes have tracked very clearly to one of our strands of activity, some track less well, but the content is important, and it is about where it sits in our transformation programme. So for instance, on the previous slide, there was a reference on all, you know, you've got to kind of sit quiet and go, right, if that's what we're trying to achieve, these are the enablers and this is the action. And some of those actions on that right-hand side were, you know, things which don't necessarily appear in here, but they're talking about our PRU paper, which we brought, where we're rationalising and improving our pupil referral unit approach. So you can see we're trying to kind of get our transformation plan to kind of, in a sense, fit the building blocks, because it's all valid and all those values are right. It's just about how we can interpret them. So I just want to say that, you know, we always have to think, lots of us are focusing on, understandably, the 90 million quid of the high need stability grant, which is important to us for the long term, even the short term survival of the council. But we have to remember this is part of a wider issue to transform all of our services. So some of the slides will get fuller and the text will get smaller because there's a lot to put in. But it is part of our transformation.
Thank you for the clarification. One of the points I was going to make, I'm just conscious that over the past week, members of this committee have been reading and trying to digest lots of information. And I recognise the fact that some of this information is evolving, but personally, I have concern that being able to understand, I'd see in that slide with my poor little dyslexic head, and trying to understand where it is. So I go back, and members, I'm just to reassure you a little bit in the fact, go back to one of my original statements. We're looking at this in effect from a strategic point of view first. The detail will come. One of the notes I've already made, which I will potentially talk about later, is having a clearer understand, a governance map, I suppose, or something like that, so that we can understand a little bit better where it goes. So I've got that, members, to do. So thank you for the clarification. It's just that it's important as chair. I need to clarify now that the amount of information that members are being asked to absorb is likely to complicate things a little bit. So we'll do the best we can with the information we have available to us. Thanks, Rowan.
And yeah, so as when we get into questions and things, I mean, obviously as a program project manager, that's key, isn't it? How do you affect change? How within all of these things do you make a difference and you can show benefits and change? And of course, there's two things at play there. There is, we want to obviously pass the DfE's agreement on this, so that we can get the 90% high needs block stability grant. And we need to also develop operationally a practical programme and plan of change. And they're both interrelated, but obviously the time pressure is very much about getting this back to the DfE on time and getting their approval. So please bear that in mind. When I'm very much, as a project programme person, I've got that in my mind about how do we practically do that, and we can talk about that as we go through.
Something that might help committee actually to understand is if we go back to the diagram before, Andrew, if that's okay. So when we originally wrote the plan, which is the copy that you've got, it wasn't linked as strongly to some of the feedback, which we'll talk about later from the DfE. It wasn't as strong as they would have liked it to have been to the 4 building blocks. So the 4 building blocks are the ones that are on the first column. And then what we've done is mapped across to those 4 to try and make it clearer. And when we go into the next slide, again, you'll see how we've mapped the work that's happening with the DMP across to those blocks as well.
Thank you.
Rowan, bear with us 2 seconds. Councillor Leishon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that this slide has suddenly made everything come into focus for me. And actually, I really hope that this way of presenting what I call the 4 pillars actually is used as we go forward, so that we perhaps give members, including me, a better chance of understanding exactly how we're responding to government and how we're making sense of this in all of our delivery plans. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. If you could just move on to the pink slide with DMP projects incorporated. So the deficit management plan, and that was the key reason I was asked to come here on an interim basis, was agreed at full council in September, and had a number of different financial benefit realisation projects, and we had to work on those and define those further, and some very ambitious financial targets around them. So the DMP projects are proposed to be incorporated into this plan, and that include, and you can see how we're trying to map them together here. You've got the DMP project on the right, as Ruth mentioned, and then you've got the what we're calling it in the SEN reform. Some of them have changed slightly so that we can make them a bit more focused. For example, there was one called the demand management project within the DMP. Well, that's actually different things. So one part of it is about early identification and intervention through Section 23 notifications. Another part of it is about the development of a single front door, a single point of contact and process so that we can manage demand in that way as well. So we've been looking at that and trying to make sure that we've got a sort of clear read over. The SEND units is called specialist bases. Special school capacity was called additional special school places. EHCP reviews, which is a large one, which has taken a while to resource and staff, and that's now in place, has been changed to area-based transition planning, and then we've got this the Section 23 transitions. Supported employment. So this is the supported internships, the groundbreaking nationally recognised work of Julie Young and team, Deanne Mahoney and others, is still there, and an absolutely central part, because this SEN reform plan is not just for school age children, it's for 0 to 25, so it's got early years. It's also about post 16, it's ensuring that there are positive destinations as well. And then demand management tribunals is now called disputes and resolutions, and various things in there. This is not to say that all of the problems of the DMP are solved through the SEN reform plan. We still have, we still have to look at that and develop those, develop those projects and deliver those projects. But what we are saying is that we're incorporating in that, and we're proposing, I think, a closure report for the DMP, which to formally, and we'll ask for members sign off of that, so that we can formally incorporate it into the SEN reform plan. So the next slide, please. Yes, please. Education places is not my forte, so I'll pass over to
Fine.
Ruth.
Okay, I will embrace my inner Phil. So I've had lots of conversation with Phil, so hopefully I'll be able to bring you up to speed with where we are. So obviously I think it's really important to acknowledge that there will still be the standard education growth. So we're talking about new schools and the work that's taking place in Taunton. So we know that we've got challenges in the Taunton area around the number of placements for children. So that will sit outside of SEND, but we are linking it in and making sure that those new builds will also be linked into our SEND provision mapping plan. We're looking at increasing the use of inclusion bases. So been referred to in here before about SEND units that used to always make us twitch because we didn't like that term. The government have now called them inclusion bases. So we're looking at 362 additional specialist places in mainstream. So they will be able to access specialist provision, but on a mainstream site. We're also looking at how we are allocating our places to special schools, and there will be some increase in special school placements as well. The other areas that are being looked at, which link very closely to the SEND reform plan, is how we adapt and adjust our environment. So Amelia talked a lot earlier on around dysregulation and how some of our children are really struggling within some of our school environments. There are only so many spaces that you can turn into a sensory space within a school. So it's actually about how do you adapt the entire school environment to make it a more calming and relaxing experience. Now, there are some real academic benefits to this. Research has shown that if you get the environment right, then children's academic attainment can go up by a full level. So it's really important that we look at this as well. And then obviously, as Scrutiny is aware, there's been a review of the PRUs, and we're looking at what that looks like alongside our alternative provision offer. Often what we find at the moment is that some of our children go into alternative provision and then stay there. The idea is that it should be, a lot of children, it should be short term and supporting them to get back into a mainstream education. So we're looking at what that offer does. And when I go through the engagement later, I'll talk a little bit more about that. You're right to click on, Andrew. Our next slide just shows you how that capital investment is going to be used, and you can see the investment that's going there into SEND unit places and the builds that are going to be happening. Okay, and I'm going to hand over to Camilla, who is going to be talking about experts at hand.
Thank you, Ruth. So it's nice that we're now starting to talk about maybe some of the things we can do about those very huge real challenges that we are facing at the moment, and experts at hand is a real positive and exciting part of that. So following on from hearing about the sort of education places and improvements, so we're going to have more children included at school. It's about having mainstream schools skilled up and able to meet the needs of more children and the cohort of children that they now face when they're attending their settings. So in Every Child Achieving and Thriving, the government was very clear that they wanted to expand the access to multi-agency support in mainstream. They talk about professions such as speech and language therapy, educational psychology, other professions to support alongside outreach from specialist provisions as well. And their reasoning is that teachers and education leaders consistently tell us that better access to expert advice and support is one of the most effective ways to meet the needs of children and young people with SEND. So how do they think that will be delivered? They've asked the ICB and local authorities to work together really closely around this to deliver it through partnerships. And one of the main principles really is early access to support without the need for referral. So bypassing what we know are quite long waiting lists in some cases to make sure that that support gets in really early before needs start to escalate. So in Somerset, the approach we've taken is a real partnership one. So we've involved our Somerset NHS Foundation Trust as a real key partner in this, who employ a lot of the therapists. We've got our local authority services. And we've also used learning that we have. So there's projects such as the Partnership for Inclusion for Neurodiversity in Schools, the PINS project, has been really successful in Somerset. There's also the learning from national pilots such as early language support for every child, and the expert experience we have to try and put all of this together, working really closely in partnership with Somerset Parent Carer Forum as well, in how we do this. And what we're thinking of the experts at hand is that a lot of the support that goes in is actually quite reactive and is around individual children, young people, often at a point when they get into crisis. And this is all about being much more proactive, supporting educational settings. So we've got some of our delivery principles around that building capacity to meet need. So that's about the experts not going in necessarily to work directly with the children and young people. What you're doing is working with the settings to enable them, giving them the tools and the skills that they need. We're going to base it around localities. We're also thinking about how we can do that around our health neighbourhoods, how we can use family hubs, and other ways of getting that local feel and having those kind of neighbourhood, linking with neighbourhood health teams as well. And if a locality itself is quite big, so maybe we for some things we might need to go down to something like a pyramid of schools or early years community to really also post-16 partnership, really delivering at that local level what's needed in that particular area. We want everything to stay quite, it is experts at hand, so we don't want generic workers going into support. It is about having those experts, but we are also, so we're going to each discipline will have a designated expert, somebody at a high level who really is able to give that expert advice. But then the staff, we can use a skill mix so that we get appropriately trained, qualified and supervised staff working with settings and really using the best of that. We're looking at being multi-agency, coordinated within the locality. Multi-academy trusts actually employ some therapists themselves, so let's use their learning from that. How has that worked well, and how can we link in with that and use the best sort of evidence-based practice that we can. And the emphasis is on sort of going alongside, so we don't want it just to be a training offer for schools. What we're hearing and what we know is effective is that it's about going in, modelling, coordinating and actually going alongside schools in order to help them with meet the needs of a wider range of children. We want to be really outcomes focused, so we'll have measurable improvement over time, not just advice and go away, but actually measuring the changes and not just measuring activity, but measuring the outcomes of that activity. And as a workforce, we need to develop those sort of common values, pathways, models and terminology, just using the best of everybody's skills and knowledge in order to deliver it. Go on to the next slide. There's quite a complicated diagram of this, but the bits to bring out, I think, are if we go around the sort of outside, yes, inclusive curriculum and teaching is going to be absolutely key, boosting that first line good teaching so that more children feel really included. Looking at things like the physical and sensory environment. So we have you know, we know that it's about removing some of those barriers to children feeling really part of things and really included. One of those examples is around medical needs while children are at school. School settings are telling us that they're worried about meeting those needs. So part of the expert's hand could be giving them more support in order to ensure that those children can be safely included and can be attend as much as their health can allow them to do so. Around the bottom, colleagues have already talked about the importance of wellbeing and transitions, and neurodiversity and communication is a huge area of need where we see a lot of the issues arising and where we can have some really good impact. And family life is absolutely key. And whatever we do in Experts at Hand, we want to help schools to really make those links with parents, because it will only work if not only are the schools feeling more confident in meeting the needs, but the parents and families of those children and young people feel more confident in their local school being able to meet needs, and that their child is safe and happy within their school environment. So again, we're making sure the experts at hand doesn't just sit as an extra thing, that it's really embedded with everything else. So you can see there are some roles there that are in green that are the experts at hand funded roles that we're proposing, and others that are in blue that are already there but need to be closely intertwined. So we've got a lot more work to do. We've done a lot of scoping and ideas and whatever, but we need to test out our thinking and do some really strong co-production on this, because we've had to do this at great pace. And as it was mentioned, we still don't actually have the detailed guidance on how experts at hand will work. So once that comes out, we will need to be quite agile and be able to adjust our plans in line with that.
No, I think I align this to trying to do a jigsaw puzzle without having the picture on the front, because the guidance still hasn't come out, which is quite hard. I think what you'll see is when we go through the next section around the engagement, you'll see how the expert in hand has been shaped due to the engagement that's taken place. Okay, Andrew, if you can click onto the first one for me. Just before we start this, I think it's really important to understand that, as we said, we found out about this mid-March. So in reality, from the time that we had to put our first draft into the Department for Education for feedback was 2 months, of which 3 were school holidays, 3 weeks of school holidays. So actually to do any level of engagement at a significant level has been really, really challenging, and I think we need to acknowledge that. And as a partnership, that was one of the things that we knew. So what we've done is we've outlined on here the dates of the engagement that we've done, what we've done so far. There is more work going on, and I think that's really key to emphasize. This isn't we've done the engagement, that's it, we've written the plan, end of. This needs to be a continual process over the whole of the 3 years of this programme, so that we can make sure that it is adjusting to needs as they come up in the system, and that we're being reflective of what our local children, young people and families and schools are telling us. Nice ringtone.
Just
okay.
pause for a second.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the things, those of you with long memories will know that one of the things I started off when I was chair of this meeting was asking people to make sure that their phones and their devices were muted. What I did at the time was suggest that anyone that does have a bleep or a buzz or alarm, that they would perhaps like to make a donation to the chair's charity. That tends to concentrate people's minds a little bit. So could you please check your devices are on off or on stun only, please? Ruth, thank you.
Yes, I learnt my lesson on that one. Okay, so to start off with, we're just going to talk about children and young people's voices, because that's the most important. We need to understand what they want for their lives. So we've done some work around this with our engagement groups. We've run a survey, and this is the feedback that's come through the survey in particular. And again, this isn't just the only conversation that we're having. There's lots of conversations, and this will be a continual process. You'll find that the themes on this link very closely to the children and young people's plan. And the things that have been highlighted in there. So our young people are reporting that they don't feel that they're prepared for adulthood. They don't feel that they necessarily have the life skills to be able to prepare for their adult life. Interestingly, doing work with children that do not have SEND equally are saying exactly the same thing. Communication and access to information is often poor, and they find it difficult to be able to get the information that they need. That we're not necessarily seeing or working with their individual needs or their own experiences, and that they don't always feel that they're being truly listened to, and that their individual needs are being acted upon. They also talked about resources and how actually both physical and financially there's barrier to support for families locally. We know that we're living in a cost of living crisis still, and that's obviously impacting as well. Processes can often be very complicating, and that means that sometimes our children don't hit the necessary thresholds, or they feel like they're repeating the same information multiple times. Now, bearing in mind we are going into a new SEND reform, and the aims of the last SEND reform was for people not to have to repeat their story over and over. That's quite concerning that we're still having that conversation. People that took part in the survey felt that SEND education is required for services schools and potential employers. So it's really important that they get this right. And young people with SEND and their families felt that sometimes they were being left behind with less options for higher education and employment. And I think that really has come home, hasn't it, in the last week, where we've seen all of the reports in employment opportunities for young people. Okay, we can click onto parental survey, please. Thank you. Okay, so we've collected feedback from our parents. You can go and have a look on the forum's website. There is a submission for the SEND reform, which is about 26 pages. So I've tried to get it into one slide. The main thing, I think, was that the expert at hand offer was seen really positively by families. They felt this could be really supportive. However, they had some significant concerns about where all of the EPs, speech and language therapists and occupational therapists were going to come from. I think it was quite often the comment was they're not just sat at home waiting for somebody to pick up the phone and ask if they'd like a job. So I think that's one of the big concerns for families is actually, and we're all going to be in the same pool. We're all going to be trying to get the same people to come and work for us. So that's going to be a challenge. They've raised concerns about the fact that locally we're being asked to write this plan. And actually the plan was being asked to be written before the consultation had been closed. And that obviously caused a high level of anxiety and feeling from families that actually it was a done deal, the consultation at a national level. And they felt because we haven't got the guidance and full guidance, that could lead to inconsistency, and they weren't quite sure how that was going to play out locally. Parents again emphasise it's really important to have that joined up approach between education, health and social care, and it needs to be seamless support. So the not feeling like you're being pushed from one person to the next person was really key. This one I think is really important, and Camilla did talk about this when she was talking about expert at hands. Success needs to be measured by the impact on children and young people, not just on activity or access figures. So it's not just a case of an EP has seen 100 children, but what's the difference that's made? Picking on poor EPs, sorry EPs. But they were really keen that actually it needs to be about impact. That's what we need to see, the changes. Families again highlighted importance of understanding masking, demand avoidant behaviour and different presentations of need. I think it's fair to say, and Amelia mentioned earlier, that the level of need within mainstream schools compared to 10 years ago is very different, and actually training hasn't kept pace with that. So I think it's important, and for our families, we're saying it's really important that that is brought up to date and that actually the support is non-judgmental, because often parents feel like they're being blamed for things. And then the other major concern, which unless you have been completely blind to SEND reforms over the last 2 months, will not surprise you at all. Parents are very worried about ISP's individual support plans and how that will take away legal rights that are currently within an education and healthcare plan. Okay, we can click onto professional feedback. Again, you'll see all of these align. So professionals are saying that, you know, they are currently experiencing challenges also. So we talked about the 1,000 EHCP assessments that are currently waiting. These are all things that are putting pressure on the system, but they talked about how we can actually be pragmatic as a system and try to work through those with improved comms and managing situations. Also talked about career development. So Amelia talked about it's very difficult to get learning support assistance within a school. I noticed this has got a lot of acronyms on this slide. Sorry, I'll try and explain them as I'm going through. Learning support assistance. So actually what career progression is in place for them, what qualification could we put into place to support them. Schools would like to be linked more closely with special schools and SEND units for that professional support so that we've got that shared learning. We've got some brilliant expertise in our special schools that could be shared across into our mainstream settings. We've looked at training and development for the SEND units and how that can play a role with them then being able to go out and support others. Specialist support for early years at the moment is insufficient. So a lot of our early years providers are finding that they're not able to access in and get the support that they would like to be able to. So looking at what does that look like? Again, inclusion basis for targeted and targeted plus, which is the 2 new levels that are coming in with the SEND reforms. We touched about AP earlier and said about the fact that often a lot of students go into AP and never come back out of AP. But our AP would like to look at actually what does that offer look like in Somerset, and they would like to be seen as part of the overall workforce. So they would like to be involved in those conversations. Alternative provision, sorry. Yeah, sorry. You do get a bit into it of all of these acronyms, sorry. And then there is potential for us to collaborate with further education sector, so our colleges, particularly looking around those qualification and career progression for our learning support assistants. Note to Andrew to take out all the acronyms. So, okay, Rowan, are you happy to go through the initial DFE feedback?
Sure.
Thank you.
As part of the process, all areas in the sub-region, the new ICB cluster area are all sort of meeting regularly to discuss our plans and ensure a coordinated approach, because the ICB is signatory of this, as well as the 6 councils. We all submitted our plans to the DFE on the 15th. Actually, I think it was on the 18th of May. We submitted, and they've shared back various things with us. So we originally didn't use those 4 building blocks, which, because we wanted to focus, quite rightly on this challenge, dysregulation, and that is, really important. And so we'd structured things in that way. Well, we've had some feedback back that and also through discussing with other areas, that this is the way. This is the recommended approach, is to use therefore 4 building blocks, and we didn't quite like some of the definitions in them as well, because we found it slightly contradictory. What did they actually mean underneath there? But we've now reframed it around that. So that was a key thing. We've also, it's really important that we reference the 0 to 25, not just school age. So there is this challenge within schools that are the schools that parents, that everyone's talking about, which is about that regulation of in schools, but that we need to also ensure that we're focused on the early years and post 16 as well. So that was some feedback there. They were very positive about the level of detail in our submission as well, our draft submission. They really felt that we'd gone into lots of thinking about this. It wasn't superficial, and as I think that they were very positive on that. But they just saw a few gaps, and they were sort of advising us on that. They want us to include more metrics, for example, in our roadmap, to ensure that the so what questions, what is going to change, which parents are also asking, are addressed within that. So they want to make sure that we're looking at that. A big challenge with this is actually the form as well. The form is quite constraining in terms of what we can and can't do. There are word lengths and various things. So they want more on early intervention and transition between phases, which was in there, but I think perhaps was slightly hidden in some of the detail. So we've pulled that out more. What other things are important to mention?
It talks about reference to SALT, that's speech and language therapy,
Yes.
for anyone that picks that one up.
And Camilla, is there anything else you'd like to add on that one?
Yes, so that is a requirement at an ICB cluster level, but obviously each of the local reform plans needs to reflect that. And I think we were also around that neighbourhood health teams. That was something that we wanted to build in a bit more. That is still at early stages within ICBs and within health, but is absolutely going to be critical alongside the localities.
Thank you. Sorry. And yeah, so the relationship with schools is very important. Also about the relationship with the ICB and the reorganisation. So ensuring that we have that is clear within the plan. They wanted more information on our experts at hand model and how that was going to work practically as well, and how it would work. So we were talking. So we'd included in Appendix 1 reference to experts at hand and a menu of different choices, and they were saying, okay, well, how's it going to work? And that was a key thing. So we're trying to address that in the reworkings. Accessibility of the plan for all partners, and yeah, that's a really important thing. Quite difficult with their form though. ensuring just basic sort of project and program basics, ensure clear roles and responsibilities for actions listed in success measures. So they're the key things that I heard. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think Rowan's really sort of highlighted that actually one of the big challenges was just the formatting of the form. So it was I felt like, you know, when you have to do funding bids and you only have to get everything in like 250 words, it was a bit like that. So that's why you will see in your packs, there are a lot of appendices that have been referred to be able to get the detail in. Before I hand over to Hazel, who's going to do our next section around the governance, I thought it'd be just worth mentioning that Somerset is one of the only areas actually that I've seen that is taking this through scrutiny. It was brought out last night on some of the national forums about the fact the lack of scrutinising of the plans that are going in from different areas. So I think we need to acknowledge that Somerset's a bit ahead of the game there. So thank you, Chair, for that. And I think it's just us being aware that, you know, the governance that Hazel's going to talk through, it is a work in progress at the moment. So just bear with us, and I'm going to hand over to Hazel, who's online. Oh yeah.
Just to add on that, I've been searching around for published plans and papers and because I really wanted to learn from other areas, and I can say I haven't found another council in the whole of the UK that has done what we've done. So yeah, it's really great. It's democracy in practice, but of course it means that you've had hundreds of documents at a draft stage to read as well. But yeah.
Thanks for that, Rowan. I just wanted to share with everyone, although they've shared the feedback from the department, there was some really positive feedback. They've given the feedback on things that we need to develop, but there was also some positive feedback and assurance that we were on the right track with some of the other elements of the documentation that we submitted. So I'm just going to talk to you a bit about the governance, because as I said in the beginning, one of the building blocks we need to address is the governance. So this programme delivery principles, as you can see there, it's been overseen by an independent chair. We've got a programme group to ensure that we've got good relationships, and we're looking at really thinking about how we can develop the governance across the wider Children and Young People's programme. You'll be aware that the ICB is actually going through a restructure as well. So we need to ensure that what happens at Somerset Council complements and aligns with the governance and the capacity within the ICB. But some of the key things we want to ensure is that when we do the programme, that we're clear about who will be delivering that they're bringing in the right relationships, that there's clear ownership about lines of work. Part of this programme is about, as I said at the beginning, delivering outcomes and impacts for children, young people and their families. So we need to ensure that we've got a way of recording that, the activity, what the outcomes are, and that there's some sort of improvement process embedded into our plans going forward. Again, this is about laying the foundations for long-term change and sustainability and improvement for outcomes, and that the chairs of the various boards and groups are given the training and support that they need to effectively chair a range of meetings, and that they're able to be part of this wider transformation board. So one of the things that we need to do going forward is to really do some further work about clarifying the purpose, functions around decision making, accountability and programme management. So as has already been stated, this is a work in progress, but we wanted at this point just to outline to you our proposal around how we can enhance that governance arrangement. So this is very much a draft governance proposal, and it's building on what we already have in place, but also what we need to develop to ensure that we're effectively delivering a comprehensive programme for children, young people around Somerset. So in the centre of that, we've got our partnership arrangements. And some of you will already be aware that we've got a Somerset board, which brings together wider partnerships. And we've also had previously a children's transformation board. And that's one of the boards that we really want to be holding that strategic alignment together. As already been shared with the blocks, there are a range of different programmes that will be complementing the SEND programme, but also complementing how we deliver children's programmes across Somerset. So we've got early years interventions, we've got the post-16 interventions, transitions work, etc. So in there, we've got a Joint Commissioning Programme Board, which is already in existence. So again, we're looking to bolster that and make sure that children and people's programmes comes through that. We've got the localities, which has already been developed and aligns with our intentions in the NHS to do the neighbourhood work. We've already got a Family First programme and a Best Start in Life programme that need to be developed. We've got a SEND Reform Programme Board and a Mental Health Board. Some of these, as I've already stated, exist, but it's about how do we ensure there's consistency and a standardisation across those. So in each of the different areas, we'll be looking to bring in the council officers' internal governance within the council. We'll be looking to align that with the governance around safeguarding and the schools forum. We'll be looking to align that with the stuff around scrutiny already within the council and within education. And also we'll be looking to develop a forum where we've got that participation and engagement with children and people. Again, some of that work is already in place. It's about making it much more robust, clearer, and enhancing the skills and capacity of the board members to drive forward this innovative programme. Next slide, please. So that's the end of our presentation. Hopefully it's addressed some of your concerns. As Rowan's already said, this is quite unique to go through scrutiny, but we feel that it's an important stage to not only have your seal of approval, but to ensure that you're involved in that discussion as well for your areas that you represent, but also the organisations that you represent. So at this point, I can see that there's some hands up. So I'll hand back to you, Chair, if you want to have the questions. And I just want to thank Rowan and Ruth and Camilla for stepping in and supporting us with the presentation, and Andrew as well, who's been taking us through the slides. So thank you all for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Members, I am conscious that we've had a good go and read lots of information there. So what I'm going to suggest in the first instance is that we take a 10-minute break to allow anyone to recharge their cups, etc., and then we can come back for questioning. Just one point before I do break for the fact that it's coming to scrutiny is taking a number of people are pointing some praise. What I would suggest is that the reason it's coming to scrutiny is because our decision maker process says it should, and that's one of the things so it's the fact that our decision maker process is robust and it puts the ducks in the correct order, whereas some councils may not do that. That was just a point of reference there. A 10-minute break. We will restart at 11:50. Thank you. This then obviously we've had a lot of information put in front of us, a lot of direction to travel. I believe this decision is going to the executive on Wednesday, so for those of you that are like me will be joining that meeting, you'll understand that some of this may be repeating. Hopefully it'll run a little bit smoother. One of the things I want to make sure that we did, and one of the reasons it's coming to us, is so that we can have a conversation about some of the points that we think are important and maybe pick up some recommendations. Now I'm just conscious that I didn't want to preempt things, so one of the things that rather than trying to make it up on the hoof, I have a number of draft recommendations that the Vice Chair and I have sat down and looked at, which I think most of the points that were covered so far have been done. So with the line of questioning, obviously will help us influence that. If there are any firm recommendations, members, that you want to make sure that's included, bring them up and we'll keep a note as we go, with an idea being that as we get towards the end, and I'm trying to summarise, where we are and where we're going with this, it might be just a little bit easier so that to help us work around the recommendations so that we can go through. But I do know that obviously the decision makers, the main decision makers around this are in the room with us, so they will hear the debate. As always, please, if you could put your hands up and indicate if you want to speak. My Vice Chair will be taking a running order for me and we'll be working through that as well. That's similarly online, but just to be clear, just to make sure that the process is there, I'll take questions from people in the room at least once. Once questioners have been dealt with, we'll then look at questions online and then we'll start bringing it back. Members, we've been going for the best near enough 2 hours now. So I know I've said it before, but if you could try to keep your points concise and not talk around it, because it would make us easier to hopefully get more questions in and understand where we're going. Okay, so what I'll do in the first instance, I'll bring in my vice chair first to ask his points, and then we will go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Questions so far, I've got Mike Hewitson online, then Sławek, Chris, Francis, Alistair, Henry. Anybody else want to ask a question? So John and Emily, and did I miss anybody this side? Marcus. Did I miss anybody else? Okay. As you heard, this is quite new to me. I've got my glossary of terms here, which I've actually added to during the morning. It's a long time since I was involved in childcare. I won't say how long it was. I was a senior childcare officer many years ago, and a youth leader and a teacher. And more recently, as a management consultant, I trained a lot of head teachers and most of the FE college principals in management and leadership. So those are my angles on the education sector. But so coming back into it suddenly and having to understand all this stuff in the last 10 days has been interesting, let's say. So firstly, thanks to everybody who's contributed. That was a tremendous team effort. I actually was struck by, I think what Amelia showed us was her commitment and genuine feeling for the whole thing that she's leading. And she's obviously led it well because the team was able to step in and give a very clear presentation. So thank you all for that. Also grateful to Lee and Evie and Heather for spending a lot of time briefing me over the last week or so, finishing up last night. If you saw me hand a package to Heather at the beginning, that was Heather's reward for an hour's conversation yesterday evening. It was a sausage sandwich. I can tell you later what the backstory to that is. Yeah, I had a lot of trouble with this, and I'm used to writing and editing long reports, but this is the most complex I've ever seen. Quite a confusing document, but you've got 18 days to get it right, and clearly it's a work in progress, and it will be got right. So that's the start assumption. A lot of jargon. I was very struck by the phrase move through the world without having to force our way through it. And then I asked ChatGPT, and they said, "Oh well, that's a common phrase nowadays in this sector." Well, new one to me, and I think it's very powerful. And the word dysregulation, I think, at the heart of this is powerful too. So I've got three questions. The first one is very specific, and I did check this with Amelia at the start. Probably a question for the ICB. For Camilla, page 10.8, there's a number missing. It says at least, and then there should be an XX in there, which isn't there. At least a number of experts at hand, enabling 250 children. So what's the number? Do you have a feel for the number? Because that's going to have to be clear. I'll come back to my other two questions or do you need time to look at that?
Check which document. Sorry, there's a lot of documents. Was the main one?
Page 10, and it's the page headed. It goes in italics. 3, increase confidence and reduce conflict. It's page 10 in our document.
Forgive me. It appears in the supplement, which is the reform plan itself. And it is, as you say, on page 10 on the supplement paper in your pack.
So if you're looking at ModGov, the supplement, the agenda supplement for today's paper, which is the reform plan itself. If you look at page 10 of that supplement, then the last item, bullet point 8.
And when I asked Amelia about this before the meeting, she said, yeah, there should have been a double X in there. And that's because we haven't agreed yet with the ICB what that number should be. County wanted a bigger number, ICB wanted a smaller number. So what's the number going to be?
Can I just jump in there? Sorry. Clearly we need to go away and find that number. So can I just request that we have a bit of time to clarify that, and we can get back to you either today or via some form of email and communication, because we're still, as we've said, developing the plan and getting it finalised.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hazel, for jumping in. So just for clarity, so we've noted that question, and I think without putting words into Mike's mouth, I think he's right to bring it up at this stage, because when it needs to be something there by Wednesday, so that there's some clarity around it. So Mike, continue, please.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, the next question is about your degree of confidence as officers that the plan meets the DfE's expectation. Now, we did get some good feedback on that. I was struck by the words in the DfE instruction document, this one, where they say the DfE will offer intensive support if they believe a plan is at risk of not meeting the minimum quality threshold. So can you just confirm that they didn't say that we're at risk of not meeting the minimum quality threshold?
Sorry, I've been coming in and out. I do other things. No, they haven't said that that's what they want to do. They've given us feedback, which has been very clear, which we've shared with you here. I think largely, as Rowan and Ruth have said, they are satisfied with what we've submitted as a draft. They've given us very clear indicators of what we need to do to tweak that. But they are definitely not, we're not in the intensive support phase at all.
Thank you, Claire. So that's
so I suppose I have the disadvantage of working on multiple plans across different areas because of supporting other forums. And I would say the feedback that we've had from the Department for Education has been quite light compared to other areas. So they're obviously relatively happy with us, if that helps.
As you anticipated my next question. So thank you. So just to round off then, I mean, year one, they've made clear is about progress, not completion, and demonstrating grip, interesting word, and a credible trajectory. So how confident are you and how confident the department that demonstrating grip and having a credible trajectory is where we are?
I think we do have a credible plan. I think one of the comments from the DfE is we need to put more detail in that to be able to evidence the sort of the timelines and what we intend to achieve over what period. And we are working on that now to make that more specific so that they can see the detail of that. But we understand what we need to do, and we're confident that we can put that in place in the timescale we've got.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we talked about a governance map earlier, and I suppose a target sheet, or as I would call it, a dashboard. So some timelines and stuff so that we could. So I think as Scrutiny, one of the things we need to be able to do is to see what was planned and be able to hold you to account, and so how you're achieving it. I think that's an important point in relation to that, making sure we're doing what we say. You said we did, sort of thing. Did you want to come in, Ruth?
Yes, I think there's been some really robust financial modelling that's taken place around this, because obviously the plan is linked to ensuring that we've got that stabilisation of high needs funding. And I think it's fair to say that we need to be really grateful to the finance team, because they have done some amazing work and they put in some really long hours, including weekends, to get that modelling over the line in time. But that has given us some really good basis to work on and to be able to work out what we need to do.
Thank you. I'm going to break my own rule about bringing people in. Mike Hewison has been very patient. He's had his hand up from early on. So, Mike, I'll bring you in now if you want to. So I think your point is relevant.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, members. So I had a slight start when Rowan said earlier on that that they were going to propose a closure report for the DMP. I'm not aware that that's been discussed as a member of as a member of the member oversight panel for the DMP. That would be a very helpful thing to have discussed with us. Has this been agreed with the 151 officer, and are other local authorities doing the same? That's the first part of my question.
Sorry, I put my hand up there. I do actually recall that being discussed, I think, at the last standing panel board meeting, I believe, because I don't think I made that up, but I'm sure Rowan will give you some information. I think the idea about the having a closure report was not to say, oh, that's done and dusted, you know, let's crack on. I think it's about getting that clarity between what was in the DMP originally, which was obviously drafted 18 months ago virtually, and then what we're working on with the SEND reform plan to make sure that it all collates properly together and that nothing is lost. So it's not like saying that the closure report means we can forget about it, but that people get assurance about where those actions have gone in terms of which live document or which live project is holding it. I don't know if that's your take on it too.
I could just say, so I think what we're trying to do, Councillor Hewitson, is have one financial plan for around SEND and how we're going to manage it. So we don't want to have a DMP plan and a SEND reform plan in terms of finances. We want to amalgamate them so that we have one. So the closure is a sort of technical phrase, I suppose, in terms of how do we integrate the DMP into the SEND reform plan's finances so that we have one plan, that standing panel will then clearly become the SEND reform standing panel, so that you can monitor the impact and the progress on the financial aspects of the SEND reforms plan, not just the DMP, because the DMP will be integrated into that plan.
So just to confirm, has the 151 officer signed off on that approach?
So the proposal was at the DMP standing panel was to come back to our next standing panel on July the 14th with a proposed report which would include which would reflect on how the DMP has gone, what went well, what could have gone better, and what we're transferring over to the SEM reform plan. The current situation with the Section 151 officer is that we need to keep the activities of the DMP live. But whether that is in what we don't want is two separate programs and projects. It's going to be totally unmanageable. So this is just a draft proposal at the moment so that we can scope exactly how that's going to be how it's going to happen, and to make sure that members have sight of that and can improve that change when at the right time. If we don't have that, what we'll have is two programs side by side, difficult to administer, and it's going to be impractical. So yeah, we need to. Currently, the Section 151 officer Clive is on holiday. We will be obviously contacting him as soon as he is back to get his approval, and we have the DMP operational officers program delivery group tomorrow where we'll be discussing it as well.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the 151 officer is very keen that we have one financial oversight plan. Yeah. It's what that looks like. He is actively involved in. So, as I said, it's a sort of technical thing to say let's have one plan rather than two. And in order to do that, we have to close down one in order to create an overarching plan. So yes, if your question, Councillor Hewitson, is about is the 151 officer aware of the DMP and the SEND reform plan being integrated in terms of the finance? Yes, he is. It's the technical way that we do that we need to discuss with him in terms of what that looks like.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. My next question was around the delivery risk. So if we've had initial feedback from the DFE, we've got a period now of 18 days to get the plan finalised and submitted. When will we know that the plan has been accepted, and are we absolutely 100% confident that we will get this through the initial agreement of DFE, because there are consequences for council if this plan is not agreed at the outset? So that's the next question.
So I haven't got the precise date to hand, but basically what the process is that we submit it on. We have to submit it by June the 19th, and then we will get the result back from the confirmation back from the DFE by autumn. I think is it. So it may take quite a while for them to come back, but we will through informal channels probably get a very clear sort of steer as to whether it's going to be successful or not before then. But yeah, we are at the hands of DFE timescales on that. Yeah, are we 100% sure? Well, you have 100% commitment from the people in this room to try and do everything we can to get it through. And you know, the feedback isn't, as Ruth was mentioning, feedback it isn't the worst. There are some things we could improve. We could certainly improve the structure. I think we could certainly improve some of the project planning within it, and we'll be taking that away in the metrics. But these are things that can be done, and you've got 100% commitment from officers here to support that process alongside our member.
So I'd also say that Councillor Hewitt's our way of assessing how likely we are to be successful is really the feedback from the DFE advisors, the finance advisor and the SEND advisor, and their feedback is what we have shared with you today. So what we are intending to do is to work to the letter of exactly what they've said we need to do to improve this plan and to put that in place. I think we have another session with them this week.
Yes, on Friday.
So we have a final session with them this week where we can show them what we've done to work with their guidance and their advice. And that's as much as we can do effectively is do what they have asked us to do. And then we will submit it in the hope that their advice is the right advice, and it will therefore get through the process as we intend. And as Rowan said, we are 100% committed to doing this to the very best of our ability to get this through for children in Somerset.
Again, thank you and helpful. And then my final question was around, obviously we've got clarity that the high needs stability grant covers to the end of March 2026. So the council at the moment, until further arrangements are announced from central government, would carry the risk about any escalating trajectory on the DMP, is that correct?
Yes. So the DMP is basically is a plan to manage the overspend of the high needs block, and yes, any inability to make the DMP work to the level that it should be working or that it was originally planned to be would be a risk to the council, and would be held. The risk of that would be held by the council. So yes, because the statutory override it obviously ends at that point.
Thank you, Mike. I'll bring Councillor Leishon in, but just a couple of points. I think that's an important point to remember. Obviously, the deficit management plan was put in place for the statutory override to come into an end at a certain point. The reform plan is a follow-on from that, which when the government changed. I'll use my words in a somewhat abrupt. Not only changed the pitch, the rules, but the team numbers, and all the relevant bits around that. So the reform plan is a progression of the DMP, which is, I think, the point that we made earlier about the DMP financial element transitioning into the SEND reform plan. It is an important point to make. The uncertainty, I think, what Mike was questioning is if our plan doesn't meet the government's satisfaction. And then that still doesn't guarantee, or if it does meet the set, that still doesn't guarantee that in, let's say, the next couple of years, they'll be meeting 90% of any additional debt that's created. That is a complicated element. I'm probably speaking around it and putting words in Councillor Leishon's mouth. But Liz, you wanted to come in?
I may, Chair. I hope this will be helpful. Something that I asked very early on was, is this application for the 90% high needs grant, is it a competitive process? No, it's not. That is the thing that gave me most assurance that we were working in the right way, because when you apply, for instance, for lottery money, it does become competitive between organisations in the same geographical area. So indeed, we do have 2 more years after what we've heard from government already, and the work that is identified in the deficit management plan will be hugely important for those 2 years. Those who've already seen the executive papers for this Wednesday will have seen the outturn, and where we have now moved away from expecting to have to cover in some way the huge deficit of over 100 million to actually putting earmarked reserves aside for the 10%. But we also, as we go through this current financial year and the next, we have to make provision for we do not yet know what will come our way from the overspends of the next 2 years. So we are in a much better place, Chair, than we were 6 months ago or more. But we still have a lot of work to do as we plan for those next 2 years and how we deal with overspends and whatever percentage comes our way. Thank you.
Not wishing to put words in your mouth, there's still more questions than answers.
Indeed, but we have got one answer which actually allows us all to see slightly better at night.
Okay, members in the room, thank you. Sławek, if you could introduce yourself as well, please.
Sławek Nowakiewicz, and I'm co-opted member. I first of all wanted to similarly mirror to the Vice Chair's comments around the plan and the local authority putting this together incredibly fast, and that's a huge plan to undertake. A lot of things in the plan, my question would be why we're not doing this already, because actually they make perfect sense and they're part of the improvement for the overall SEND and the children and families within Somerset. So the question is why are we needed to wait for the SEND reform in order to put some of those things in place. And next thing I wanted to also comment on is that we have expert at hand, which is a really great support for the mainstream schools. However, over the years, we withdrew quite a lot of early intervention processes due to various reasons. And I think those also contributed towards some of the issues which we're having currently. We talked about, Amelia was showing diagram which showed the various banding and increase of the banding. I think we need to take the consideration also is that the increases of costs upon schools which were put over the last few years led also to schools requesting the uplifts of the banding, regardless on the which may not be associated with the increase of the need. So if we, for example, look at a band 5, 6 years ago, where we could provide around 70% of teaching assistants report, now we need to upgrade this to the band 7 in order to meet the same need. So the need of the child did not change. But because of the financial position, it appears. So I'm just wondering if when we're presenting that data, that could be taken into consideration. And looking at some of the data as well, which I think Europe demonstrated with the outcomes or the goals, I'm just wondering if we could have some of the descriptor at the beginning of how many children do we take into consideration for those surveys, what is the demographics, for example, so we have a better understanding how many children we're taking into consideration, so we can have a look at the overall view of the children within Somerset. And then I have a few questions as well. Sadly, my laptop shut down, so I have things just scrolled very quickly on my mobile phone, which is probably a good thing. Early years, I really feel that there has to be more information about early years. It is an essential start for the children. Getting this right would potentially avoid a huge amount of implications later on for the children, for the families, and also it will be cheaper option for the local authority. But at the moment, we don't have sufficient amount of funding for the early years, and also the expertise. If we look at the SEND expertise, it's very varied. I think several months ago, I mentioned about the training which the DfE was offering to the early years, and that was 18 months training for SENCOs. But because of the financial restrictions from the early years, not being able to release the staff, there was a very small uptake for what was fully funded training. Therefore, most of the SENCOs in our early years are 2 days trained, which is not sufficient. My next question is expert at hand, and I understand that there is no huge amount of details for the DfE. However, there is already very clarity for in the white paper, but that this needs to be put in place as from September 26-27 academic year, which doesn't give us huge amount of time. So I'm just wondering how that will be initiated and where do we get the experts from, particularly as we know that during the last restructure of the council, we got rid of all the advisory teachers, which was absolutely essential part for a lot of mainstream schools to support the children with SEND and avoid exclusions. And my last question is around the 90% of this budget being supported through the DfE grant. How that will then support the schools which are already in deficit budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Sławek. That'll keep someone going for a few minutes. Who's looking to us? That's fine.
Okay, so just so that you know what the running order is. So I will answer the question about early years and getting it right in the early years and the funding. Camilla will answer the question about experts at hand. Ruth will answer the question about the demographics and the banding, and Rowan will answer the question about the 90% and how it supports school deficits. After that. Okay, so in terms of early years, yes, we all recognise that that is absolutely critical. If we get it right in the early years, we're going to get it right for more children earlier, and fewer children are going to need that really acute, really high cost, intensive support as they go further into the school system. So as you've probably heard in other presentations at Scrutiny, there are 3 big projects going on at the moment from central government. So there are SEND reforms. There is the Families First project, which is about social care and early help. And there's also Family Hubs, which is about early help for children in the early years up to the end of reception, in terms of the government trying to improve the good level of development for children at the end of their reception year. So in terms of funding for early years, that crosses both SEND reforms and Family Hubs. And Family Hubs have significant amounts of money to focus on SEND in the early years, to make sure that early years providers have sufficient support and the right training and the right skills to be able to deliver the right support for children with SEND needs, and to identify them early, working with both health visitors and primary schools, or the first reception years in whichever school children go into, to make sure that they have the right provision in the early years and going into school. So in terms of the funding for the early years, yes, we are putting more money into early years, into the early years sector, to support their training, and also to support them to be able to educate and work with more children in the early years with additional needs, to ensure that those children get the right support to go into primary or reception year in a special school with a better trajectory, I suppose, in terms of being successful. Does that answer that element of your question, Slavik?
How quickly that will be in place? Because again, what we're doing, if the slower with that process, the more we will probably potentially create additional challenges.
So that is in place already in terms of family hubs. So there is a health visitor who has been designated and brought in with a lead for SEND across the whole system in terms of those younger children, and health visitors are now linking much more closely with early years providers to make sure that we identify those children early and support parents to get children into the right place. And the funding around training is in place. So I'm interested that you're saying that people have said they couldn't get the backfill cover, because we do have that funding in place. So there may have been some miscommunication or misunderstanding about how people could access that funding to be able to do that.
Just conscious to I want to get in as deep as we can, but I want to pick up what I think that shows, Sławek, is an opportunity. So if you want to write to us after, we'll make a note to put, because we can always put a follow-up note into the minutes afterwards to cover that. And I think Claire's made a really good point, and members around the room would have, we've talked about Best Start in Life, we've talked about the early intervention and Family First process. What I think would be helpful, again, it goes back to the governance so that we can understand what bits are feeding into when. So I've already made that note that we need some clearer, we would recommend to the executive, we need a clearer governance map, or a flow map, I suppose, because you're right, because in this instance, we're dealing with 2 cohorts, those already in the system, and those that we want to prevent from getting into the system in the future. So that's 2 bits there. Do you want to, are you happy with that, Sławek? Sorry. You happy with the next round of question? Responses rather?
So the next one is Camilla around experts at hand.
Thank you. So yeah, really good question, Anna, around the experts at hand, how quickly we can scale that up and get some help on the ground, which is obviously a challenge, looking at that we're recruiting from professions that potentially already are a shortage. So and I think it's particularly in that first year, how we spend our money in the first year, and we've done a lot of planning around this and a lot of thoughts around it. So what we're going to do is, where we can, we're going to expand existing staff. We're going to release them from some duties that maybe can be backfilled in other ways, so that they can do that work. So around our neurodevelopmental pathway, we could take on some temporary staff to do some of the assessments that might then release some of our more experienced staff who already have the links within Somerset to actually go alongside and work with schools, with educational psychologists. It would be that we can outsource some of their education, health and care plan needs assessments, so that they already have the relationships with schools. They can expand that work. We can also expand outreach. We're also looking at our PINS work, that the Parent Carer Forum could stand up for another year, because they've got a real track record of standing that support up really, really quickly. So we're really looking at that first year of spending our money, as well as our planning for the future, and for around that sort of a future sustainability of it. What we're hoping to do is actually use it. The worry is, if we do some really wonderful experts at hand sort of jobs that go out there, that we could take staff from our core services and leave our core services really short. So we are really trying hard not to do that, to actually build more, use the experts at hand roles to build more interesting jobs, that we could therefore recruit and retain more staff, because they will have more of that work actually directly around schools, rather than necessarily looking at lots of assessments or whatever. So there's lots of planning, there are challenges, but we are confident that we can roll something out during that first year from September.
Okay. Shall I continue? So I'm going to pick up a little bit on the early years, if that's okay first, just something that I think would be quite helpful for you to sort of understand. There's an awful lot of documents to try and get your head through. So one of the things that's really key with the expert in hand offer is that it has to cover early years and post 16 as well. So the team will also be working with earlier settings, and as Camilla's already said, a lot of what we're aiming to do is to go in and support in settings. So one of the biggest challenges for early years is they can't release people. So actually going in and working with them in the setting will be really helpful. The PINS programme is going to be restructured, so we no longer have to follow the national guidance. So we will be covering early years and post 16 in that as well. And we'll be looking at an enhanced offer for schools that have been involved already. That'll make Francis happy. So that's just a little bit about the earlier side. The banding, if you look on page 18, there is only one line, which probably doesn't explain it very well. So we are looking at the banding structure. There's lots of things that play into this, as you've already mentioned. You know, the costs of provision within schools has gone up over the last few years quite drastically. So all of the banding is up for being looked at, and that's part of the process. So it explains how we're going to do that across the 3 years of the plan, to have a look at making sure that the banding is effective, because we're actually also seeing an increase in costed plans coming through where the banding isn't matching. So all of that is going to be looked at as part of this process. And then the other one was demographics. Totally agree with you on the surveys. It was really difficult trying to not overkill, because I could have given you lots and lots of details, as you can imagine, and I'm happy to send across more information to you outside of here, just so that you've got that background information. It was very difficult to get it all condensed into one slide.
Just in relation to the feedback, I've made a note here that we should perhaps ask for the feedback to the parents to the survey to be included in the pack that goes to exec, so that they can look at that as well.
And just on the 90% and its impact on school budgets, a very simple answer to that one: it won't have any impact on them directly, because it will be the council's deficit that will be helping support and reduce.
Thank you. I think that's covered those points. Chris, welcome to the meeting. feel free to jump in. Microphone button on the right, I think, is one that brings the red light on.
Yep.
And if you can speak into it. Thank you. Your question, sir.
Thank you. I'm Chris Curie. I'm a parent governor from Charlton Mackerel Primary School, so I'm co-opted here. Just a couple of points again to, I think, echo what people have said about the report. I know it's a massive amount of, just huge amounts of detail. And I'm I'm new to this committee and to reading these documents at the moment, so I was also absorbing a lot. But a couple of things that came up in my mind as I went through. One, I think, goes back to that the experts at hand point, and something that I didn't get from the plan was, apart from recruiting, which is fine if there are people to recruit, but is the budget and planning for training to bring people into those careers, and is there, with the establishment of the further education partnerships, are there plans to take advantage of that to increase the number of people through training, given that we're looking at a multi-year program, budgets going 3 years, 4 years from now? In 4 years, will there be more people trained in those areas? So that was another one part. Another area of capacity is, I've been reading the experts at hand with train the trainer in mind, because there's training of teachers in schools. The school that I'm from, we're very small. We have 3 teachers. We have a enormously talented teaching assistants and high-level teaching assistants. But our teachers are already the teacher, the designated safeguarding lead. They are already a pedagogical leader. And so adding the burden of this and potentially the emotional support. So is there a plan on taking care of the well-being of those who do feel they're able to take it on? But as well as, is it something that is realistic to support in mainstream? I'm talking from the perspective of, though, a small rural school. I can't talk from the perspective of a large high school that has a greater economy of scale. Another area that I want to was, again, budget. Rowan, I had mentioned about that. The 90% isn't impacting school budgets. Again, as a small school, we don't have an economy of scale. Our upfront cost and supporting provision, we're already negative equity in terms of ongoing funding that we receive. So our financial ability to support the initiative is there. So when I read the budgets of the programme, I can't see within the line detail, and it may be there because I appreciate that there's probably tons of detail behind what's in one spreadsheet that we can download. But I can't see provision for diversification of budgets for larger schools or smaller schools and schools in a rural position, and whether this is something that a community partnership of schools needs to support. And then, sorry, last thing from me, and I promise I'll be quiet after that, is in terms of outcomes and governance, it's one of the things I've seen the governance structure. And obviously at the beginning, we're talking about a statement of families and children and families not forcing their way through the system. One thing that I reflected upon when reading everything was that's something of an output rather than an outcome. Because an outcome, if you are the parent of a SEND child, is it that you don't want to force you through, or is the outcome that you want for your family to know that your children can live independently in the future after you have passed, etc. And so is there a clarity of what is the outcome of the SEND reform plan? That is a successful outcome in the eyes of children and families. And obviously from this committee's perspective, we're scrutinising from the perspective of children and families. So is that, and then and I don't want to reiterate what was said before about governance, but is there a way to express governance that would explain how it supports that outcome? That was my questions.
Confer again in terms of answers, which question?
Okay, we think we have a plan.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, I'm going to do the easy one first. So outcomes for Somerset, there is an agreed outcomes framework which we have aligned to the plan to be able to measure. And you're right, for our families, it is outcomes about their child being happy, being prepared for adulthood. All of those are available and we can share those across to you so you can have a look. And we've been clear about mapping across the activity to make sure that we're seeing that impact coming through. Liz going to talk to you about expert at hands. The other thing that you might be, as a governor, might be quite interested in knowing is there is send inclusion funding going directly into schools, and there is a calculator online which I can send you a link to where you can put your school's URN in and it will tell you how much you're getting. Don't get overly excited to start with. Our Somerset schools are ranging in between sort of about 5,000 up to about 34, 35. So it's not a huge amount of money in the big scheme of things. But yeah, you can do that. I'm going to let Camilla talk about expert at hands now.
Yeah. Ruth. So you were asking about the training to bring into careers. That is part of the SEND reform plan nationally, and the government have said they are investing in that so that there are over, the trouble is that the programme's starting now, but they are looking at investing in training more professionals, which is really positive. Also, more locally, we will have a speech language therapist advanced practitioner covering not just Somerset, but our sort of cluster of local authorities. I think we're planning to have 2 of them. And they're going to have as a key role to be linking with training institutions, and looking at apprenticeship routes as well to see how locally we can help with that training and retention of that expertise within our area. Yes, so that's the bit around that sort of training. And there is also a national training programme that's supposed to be starting from September, which is why we're not trying to do a training programme as parts of experts at hand. There will be some training elements, but there is also a national programme about skilling up frontline teachers that will start from September, and we have yet to see the detail of that.
We think it might be with the expert at hand guidance. The other thing I think is really valid point that you've made around small schools versus larger schools, and we've definitely seen the impact of that during the PINS programme. It's much easier for a large school to be able to access, for example, in that 37.5 hours worth of support compared to one of our smaller schools, because that has such a big impact. So we are looking at what that offer looks like and adapting that to be able to meet the needs of smaller schools as well as larger schools. So one of the things that we did, for example, in PINS is we took quite a lot of the sessions online as well and tried to make it so it's part of the normal working day to accommodate that. And I'm going to hand over to Rowan, who's got the delight on budgets.
Just on the experts at hand and the budget, and so I think the first thing to say is looking at other plans that I've seen, the levels of detail on experts at hand vary enormously. There are some local partnerships and local authorities who have said we're not going to commit to anything at the moment. We want to co-produce it over the summer. There are others that have gone into about 30, 40 pages worth of detail. So it really does vary by area. But the kinds, just to give you, so we're still working it all through, and nothing has been approved yet or finalised. But things to give you a flavour of some of the things we're looking at. There's obviously the health interventions and work that we're talking about. Education psychology. So trying to free up the time of education psychologists who are employed here at Somerset to actually do deep dives and to go into schools and to work on the things that they train to do in many ways. But if we can get some support for some of the statutory backlogs and the activity from elsewhere, it means that we can do some of that. There's also around outreach is really important, and linking with our locality teams and our proposed outreach model. So I think we're looking at some. It depends. We're still sort of scoping it out, but we think that potentially we could get maybe 20 plus colleagues working from a range of different disciplines, working with our locality teams to work with schools and settings to do a range of different things, from transitions to parenting, to all sorts of different things with schools. We're also looking at inclusive curriculum specialist teachers and resource around that. The PINs is a very important part of it, which and continuing and expanding that, and also investment in co-production as well, because we need to co-produce this. We need to make sure that this is as meeting local needs as much as possible, and we can't do that on our own. So that hope. And then on the workforce training development, at the moment we don't have lots of detail on that, but we think that it would be really good to work with our RFE colleges to do something in that area. But it's work in progress. We don't need to provide lots and lots of detail at this stage, but we're trying to flesh it out as soon as we can.
Okay. Thank you, Chris, for your questions. Okay, moving on then. Francis is next. Councillor Nicholson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got 2 or 3 things, some of which are related and some of it not. I'll try and do it as briefly and quickly as I can. The first one is a matter of detail in the plan itself. At page 49 of Appendix 2, the draft plan, the box on tribunal interpretation, I think I know what it means, but I did have to read it 2 or 3 times to be sure. Should not be placed in a specialist inclusion base. I think it would help with if it's in a mainstream school, because then I would have understood. The other bit is on that is due to judges locally, but we have written to the judge, just a bit of clarity around that. Judges, the judge feels a little confusing. That's just a tiny detail that for now on the slides today. When we had the governance slide, which I think is the last one, there are various boxes, all of which are interrelated, except the elected members bit, which sits out on its own and doesn't appear to connect to anything. And it would be good to see somehow that there is some point in the elected members being there and being connected in. That's that one. The third one, the third quick point is that the white paper clearly, we just need all to remember that the white paper clearly envisages that EHCP numbers will go on going up for some time, that the money will go on overspending for some time. And the only comfort that we get is for 26, 27 and 27 and 28, this is the government saying that local authorities can expect that we'll continue to take an appropriate and a proportionate approach, though it will not be unlimited. And a nasty warning, future support will take into account LA's successful delivery of the approved plan, including appropriate use of investments and to establish experts at hand. Just there is thinking around it. We're not just sitting here thinking that oh, we don't know about this, but it is unclear. Now, those were the 3 quick things. Now, this is the bit that I've got to corral my brain. I am really worried that none of this will work unless the local authority part of this, supported by partners, can actually sort out the timeliness question, because not only of transitions, which comes up, is mentioned in the plan, but timeliness of needs assessments, because schools are being unable to sort themselves out, because we are unable to sort ourselves out, and each one feeds the other in a really vicious cycle. So that brings me to, I think, Rowan, you mentioning ambitious financial targets under the DMP, the need for EdSykes for assessments at the same time as needing EdSykes to do other things, and the fact that we've all committed, and full council and everybody else have committed to funding to sort out the backlogs, and have the budget. And we've heard the increases in costs, not only in schools, but for us. Have the budgets for in the local authority for our work, which, because send statutory work is our work, have they been tracking needs? Have they been tracking inflation? Are they in fact getting smaller rather than getting larger? And are we going to be able to do any of that stuff, which is a key enabler for anything happening under the plan? And then going on from that, things like what happens if there's slippage on the capital? Are our schools going to be, how are we going to make sure our schools are ready in time that we don't slip with the new, there isn't slippage in time with the new placements of the 540, you know, there are lots of new places, and how we've got high level outcomes. How are we going to track the baselines and the annual targets? How are we going to track the money through that? I'm sorry, I tried to corral my brain. I'm not sure I achieved it, but can you please help on all of that?
We looks a bit terrified there. Oh, right, okay. So they're all really good questions, Francis, thank you. So EHCP timeliness, obviously, is a big issue at the moment because we don't have sufficient either education psychologists or caseworkers to be able to manage the volume. We also currently, which all schools have, I've written to all schools, saying that we have even further reduced capacity to continue to process EHCPs because we have to get on top of phase transfers, of which we're out of time already. So I have directed that all resource is put into phase transfers because that means children who do not have a school place for September yet, we have to get on top of that. We're out of time already. They must have a school place by the end of the school term. So I've written to all schools about that, and parents are also being written to where their child is in the assessment process to explain that we are prioritising children in the phase transfer years in order to get those children a school place for September. Education psychologists don't actually get involved very much in the phase transfer decisions, particularly where they're, it's an agreement, but obviously they are very involved in the EHCP assessments as a rule in general. There was, as you said, a motion at full council which was supporting the recommendations of Scrutiny in relation to the additional finance being provided to recruit education psychologists and caseworkers. A business case has been prepared and is currently sitting with the 151 officer for agreement. So we haven't been able to progress the recruitment of additional staff yet because the 151 officer is still reviewing that business case.
In the at various scrutinies and at full council, but also at the exec, where there was a commitment to do this, and I was promised a timeline as to when we should be able to start recruiting. That was back, I think, in March. Are we at a point where we can have a timeline?
I think, honestly, you'd have to refer that to the 151 officer because the 151 officer is the person who is making the decision about the funding, and we can't recruit, obviously, until we have the funding in place to recruit those members of staff.
Okay, pause for a second then. So, Jack, Ayush, can we make a note, please, that we seek clarification about the position of that in the decision-making process, but bringing it back a little bit, Heather, I'm sorry, but if there's a hold-up that's creating more of a hold-up, what I'm trying to say I'll be blunt for a second. You need to sort that problem out before Wednesday so that you can have an answer there, rather than us say what's going on. I think the sensible way would be if there's a blocker stopping recruitment for something, then we'll note it. But I expect it to be something that you want to add on Wednesday when you present this, unless it's any different.
Yeah, so we're just having a bit of a kind of confirming a little yeah, it doesn't really matter when it's coming. We will make sure outside of here that we will work through how we can explain where we are currently.
So the other point I can answer before I move to Rowan is about the use of the funding for experts at hand for education psychologists. So the experts at hand funding can only be used for new resource and it can't extend existing resource. So what we're intending to do is to so currently education psychologists largely just do education healthcare plan work because that's where our pressure is. So as Rowan said earlier, what they would like to do is do much more earlier intervention work in schools so that they can actually support those children and the school so that child doesn't need to progress through that system. So we can use the experts at hand money to redeploy effectively our in-house education psychologists into those roles, so that they can go and do that work with schools and with children at an earlier point, and use the statutory funding that we have to probably this year recruit agency education psychologists to do the education healthcare plan education psychology assessments, because that is much faster than trying to recruit full-time permanent staff to do that work. So obviously we'll do that over time, but to get a quick response so we can get the early intervention in to using the grant funding that we have this year that we need to spend, we're going to use our staff in schools and then recruit using the statutory funding to temporary posts with agency staff to do the education psychology work for statutory assessment.
But only when the Section 151 officer is able to sign off the use of funding to.
Some of that will be possible with the existing funding, because obviously we have funding, statutory funding that is used to pay our existing education psychologists. So the new grant funding for experts at hand will pay those existing education psychologists to do a different job in terms of early intervention in schools. So the statutory funding we have will pay for some agency education psychologists, which we don't need to get permission to spend because it's existing statutory funding.
Okay.
Yes, it does. Yes, exactly.
Next.
Just to add to that, that will really make a lot of difference to also the backlog side of things as well. So by having that capacity, we can hopefully tackle the backlog as well. And it's very quick to deploy as well. There are organisations out there that will look at them on a case-by-case basis as well. Just on the point about the turning of the curve, and I just wanted to talk about the projections as to how this will impact it financially. They are being revised at the moment by our finance colleagues, just so we've got the latest figures. But we currently, anticipate, as elsewhere in the country, that EHCP demand is going to continue to rise for the next couple of years. And I understand that most local partnership areas are projecting that, and the government is as well projecting that. But what we do, so what the case that we are making is that through this series of interventions, through the experts at hand, through all these different things that we're doing in a really if we do it in a really coordinated, robust way with lots of project and program discipline throughout it, that we can start seeing that curve, the financial curve, and also the EHCP number curve starting to settle and then turn from 2029. So we've got so that's that on the finance side. And I'm sorry we haven't shared a visual of that today, but if you can just imagine that curve sort of turning down in a very simplistic way. It's the reason we haven't shared it today is because we don't have we still need those final figures from finance. But that's the overall intent, is that collectively through this whole collective actions, we will turn that curve, and that will be in the final submission.
Chairman, I would like to reiterate the three questions. One, about the tracking of the budgets over the last 2 or 3 years, over the rising need and inflation, etc. Have we gone backwards? Are we in a worse place now than we were a couple of years ago? Or have the budgets kept pace? That was one. The second one was, what about how in the plan are we going to deal with the slippage, both in impact for children and also on finances? And how are we going to be able to track progress, because the planning is inevitably at high level?
So I was just trying to answer that by saying that these collectively these things should turn that curve in times. Are we on progress? Are we on track? No, it's continuing to go up as it is elsewhere. In terms of the you were asking about the capital slippage and the risk of that. So on that particular question, we've got a very robust programme and plan in place to deliver that. So that is one of the parts of the plan where we feel very assured, where there's actually been overperformance compared to our original projections.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your questions, Francis. I just want to say two extra things. One is we'll all be looking to make sure that the SEND reform plan does have the relevant and correct milestones within it, so we can see precisely through the plan what our progress is, and that would have to pick up financial outcomes and financial changes, obviously. Your wider point about what has our world looked like in children's for the last 2 or 3 years and whether budgets have kept part of inflation, that is something we probably certainly couldn't get done for Wednesday, and might not even for the 19th of June. But I think there's something, I know that we're going to be working anyway, certainly on our current budgets, to understand how effective they are, how effective they have been in the last couple of years, how well we're modelling, almost line by line. So some of that work will be happening elsewhere outside of this particular bit of work that we're doing at the moment. If we can do some of the historical stuff as well, I'll look into that one as well if I can. But I won't lose it, but we won't pick it up probably through the SEND reform plan work, if that's okay with you, Francis.
Thank you very much, but I am very worried that in fact the budgets have not kept pace in any shape or form with the need, and we have been. And one of the reasons for things getting worse is that we have not been able to do what we needed to do because of budgetary constraint.
And I think I covered it earlier, but I think one of the things that we may be wanting or suggesting is that we have some sort of real-time dashboard or something like that, so that we can have an idea of where it goes. Rowan?
Sorry, one thing I didn't say was also in our experts at hand proposal, there is a 10% for supporting delivery of experts at hand. And one of the things we are currently scoping with our performance data and finance colleagues is to ensure that we've got dedicated support within that so that we can really develop quality dashboards and quality tracking, both of the finances and of the non-financial data as well.
And I'll just chuck in just a quick, I'm sure it is being dealt with. Obviously, there's the issue of different data streams. We have different identifiers for different things, and our colleagues in the ICB and NHS have different identifiers. So it's making sure that the data we're sharing is able to be interpreted by both sides. I think that's one of my old favourites that everyone that knows that I go on about. Okay, thank you, Francis. Thank you for the responses. Councillor Hendry. Oh, superb. Thank you. And that's, as we get down the list, I know Councillor Hunt will be saying that most of my points have already been covered, but I'll bring Councillor Hobhouse in next, Henry, and then it's John, Marcus and Emily, and then I'll look for any online, but we're nearly there.
I have 4 questions and I'm going to ask them to be answered one at a time. You've put in extra budgeting for the EHCPs going through getting your backlog cleared. What is your backlog now, and what are you hoping in 12 months' time with the extra funding and the extra staff, are you hoping to bring it down to?
Sorry, was that in relation to education healthcare plans?
Yes.
Okay, so there is a plan, which was what came to Scrutiny, and Scrutiny asked for it. There were 3 types of plan. One was 12 months, one was 24, one was 18, one was 24, I think, months to actually get that backlog down with the numbers in it. I haven't got that to hand, I'm afraid. Scrutiny asked that was recommended that was completed within the 12-month timescale, and I think at full council there was a motion to support that and say that was what was anticipated. As I said earlier to Councillor Nicholson, once we get the permission from the 151 officer, we will be able to recruit or try to recruit the staff to get those down to the right level within that time period. So obviously it means recruiting more staff because we're going to do it more quickly. It's not going to be within 12 months of the paper that came to scrutiny, because we've had 3 or 4 months since then where we haven't been able to progress the recruitment. But as soon as we get permission, financial permission to recruit, we will recruit the number of staff that we think we need as set out in that paper to do it within 12 months of the permission being given.
I'm only a substitute. I wasn't at the actual meeting. So can I ask the question gently again? What is your outstanding backlog? Is it 9 months? Is it 7 months on the EHCPs? And
so currently it is 45 weeks to go from application to being issued. That's the average, and it should be.
okay, I have got, as Heather knows, a number of cases in my division where it is a
Henry,
lot
let's try
longer
not
than
to go
that.
down to individual cases, please. Can
I'm
we?
not going into specific
your-
cases. I'm asking for the information. Right, moving on. I also have in my division Chiltern Canterlow School, which I am pretty certain is owned by a financial institution now and is charging and is owned by that because they're guaranteed the money, because you have to put people in there because you have nowhere else to put them at this point in time. Are you planning to create any other schools that will be able to take the more disabled ones of the children on the system?
That's quite a complicated question.
I know that.
So there are 2 points to it. So when we don't have sufficient school places in the state system, in mainstream or special schools for children with SEND, then we have to go to the independent market, of which Chiltern Canterlow be one, to make sure that they have to ask if they have the right provision for those children, and we have to pay a very significant sum for those children to go to that type of school because we have nothing else. There is nothing else, basically. In terms of can we create more schools for children with disabilities or children with SEND, the government is the only body, if you like, that can agree that those schools are delivered, and we have to apply for well, they have these things called waves. So every now and again, the government says we're on wave whatever. Does any authority want to apply for funding for a specific type of school for children with additional needs? Whenever there is an opportunity to do that, we do apply for it, and we currently have had accepted a bid that we made in 2023, I think it was, for a school for children with special educational, social, emotional, mental health issues, which would be in the east of the county because we don't have provision in that place. But because of the way the government works, the local authority would not run that school. It would be run by an academy trust. So at the moment, we are waiting for that school to be built. It was meant to be completed by March 27. The government a few months ago actually said that they thought the money could be better spent by integrating children into mainstream schools, and we could put a bid in to say whether we wanted to continue with the special school application or not. We did continue with it because we have such a volume of children who are so complex with social, emotional, mental health needs that we thought we needed a specialist school for the children with the most complex needs. That was accepted, but we now have no timescale from the government about when that school will actually be built. And we have asked for it, and they've said they can't commit to a timescale currently.
Thank you for that answer. 20 years ago, when I was a member of Somerset Council, I can't remember what the scheme was called, I was involved in the parenting up to 2 years old, creating the boundaries that the children require to be able to think. And the question I have is how many of our children that are going through SEND are only there because of a lack of parenting and a lack of boundaries. And exactly, I understand the difficulty. I also understand because I was for 2 years chair of my
we were
local.
bordering very close to.
I'm not going. Just let me. I also understand that having talked to teachers who are doing 5-year-olds, and the fact that I was chair of my local preschool, that the possibility of putting boundaries around children after 2 is difficult, firstly, and secondly, that a lot of them.
Henry, your question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just getting to it now. And I've asked part of it, and I've already been told by Claire it's difficult to answer, but it is a question about how many children are in a problem with SEND because of lack of parenting and lack of boundaries up to 2 years old.
So I can answer that in the generality. I think what you're referring to, Councillor Cobhouse, is Sure Start,
Yeah,
which was the
absolutely.
early help programme
Yep.
that was disbanded some years ago. So Family Hubs is what is the government replacement for Sure Start, and it will provide parenting opportunities for parents of children under 5, and will also offer the ability for those for health visitors and other people in that early years world, if you like, to identify children with SEND. I think it's probably fair to say that when local authorities had to reduce the amount of early help that was being provided because of financial issues, probably 8 to 10 years ago, there is certainly an impact, and the data would evidence across the country there is an impact of a loss of early help and children escalating into the social care system. It's less easy to see if there is an impact of that in terms of whether children have escalated into having additional educational needs because of the lack of Sure Start or not. But the government's plan, which is now being implemented in Somerset as it is everywhere else, is to increase the support for families in terms of parenting through family hubs, and also to implement a SEND aspect of family help and in the family hubs, which wasn't present in the previous Sure Start programme.
Thank you. So you don't have any idea of the numbers. Okay. Finally, Mr. Chairman, in relation to the ICB accountability, who is the named ICB signatory and how will they be held to account?
So the ICB signatory is the Chief Executive of the ICB, the new cluster, which is Jonathan Higman, who was the previous ICB CEO for Somerset, and they will be held to account through the governance structure, as will all the other Chief Executives and leaders of this programme.
To go back onto your previous point to that, and I Claire will correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been doing a bit of work supporting the Best Start in Life and the Family Hubs process, and one of the indicators there is about school readiness. So it's definitely on the horizon, Henry. For as far as cause and effect further down the line, I'm heartened to know that school readiness is one of the triggers that the government are talking about, and that will be from the Best Start in Life and your family hubs process. So I'll say this without my chair's hat on for a second. The stable door is now closing a bit more than it was. John, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The most of mine have been asked, which will shorten my stay, which would be good. Just firstly, an observation, if I may make it, with the 151 officer not being available to sign various things off. I appreciate he's on holiday, which is lovely. But when he is away on holiday, or he's perhaps ill, or whatever may happen to him, do we not have someone else who can sign off these things for him? That's my first, if you'd like to answer that first.
I think I'll jump in there because the cancellation is at the back, and she may want to contribute to this part of the discussion.
Just to say, Chair, that every Section 151 officer in the country has a deputy, of course.
So could I just come back then on that? Why are we not going to that deputy to get this process moving faster? You mentioned various people who need to be employed or budget money being made available to do certain things. It's been a theme throughout today. Why are we not just jumping over that now?
Sorry, yeah, so just to say that in terms of the process and timeline for this, so we have a meeting of the senior leadership executive on the 8th of June, and at that meeting, Clive, the chief executive, Section 151 officer, and other executive officers, including Claire, will be signing off the final report. So Clive has been involved throughout, commenting on details. He just happens to be on holiday right now. So the sign off, the formal sign off is when he's back.
Rowan, rather than have you having to defend it, members, we've noted the fact that the one officer is required to say, I promise you that there are at least 3 people in the room and 2 people online that are currently escalating that process so that it will be dealt with at the earliest opportunity. Otherwise, we will be getting on board. But John, continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I was just misled a little bit because the impression given was that we were waiting for him to come back, but obviously not. So that's good news. A worry which concerns us all, and you brought it up, and I just want to say a magnificent job. I know everyone else has said the same thing, but how you do your job, I do not know. 14% of all school children in Somerset, and it looks from the graph certainly that throughout the UK have some sort of SEND support. I think it was between ranges 1 and 7, something like that. The concern to me, so I'm a governor of a small school with 218 pupils at that school. 14% of that is 30. 30 is an entire class in a small primary school like the one I'm a governor at, which I have to say is extremely distressing. I know it's upsetting I'm not going to speak for anyone at my own school, I'm speaking generally now, but I know it distresses many teachers who I meet, who we all meet, and staff at all of the schools, who I think Amelia was saying that Band 1 used to be special school status. Band 1 is now dealt with, or pupils with Band 1 issues are now in the general schooling. So at a small primary school, they would be there. I think my worry, or a teacher's worry in getting staff, i.e. teachers, to work at our schools, is that they've almost become care workers. And at some point, they have to teach the rest of the school, including the 14%, and give them a good education. Are you
Sorry, just pause a second, John. Has someone joined the meeting that's not muted or something, please? Just, we're getting some feedback, that's all. Could you just check your machine? Thank
do know, but we can't really discuss it here. But so that is that question. And just very briefly on that, while I've got it open, we've got the experts at hand, family life image there, which is very good. But it's again, that could be a lot more realistic. We've got the mum and the dad and the little boy and the little girl, and above them is family. Sorry, that isn't family anymore. You know this, but on here it's almost like, do we know this? I know you do, but whoever's creating these images clearly has no idea what a family is anymore. And it definitely, and most certainly with these poor young people that don't have the advantages that others do, who come from broken homes, etc. And I would suggest that perhaps 50% of most homes are broken. So what is our level of confidence for this? The experts at hand is what it's called, I think. Can they make a big difference, these experts, and how on earth can we get the number to cover the entire population of Somerset? Thanks.
So I think I go back to what I said earlier about we can't see the SEND reforms in isolation. So yes, obviously we have a societal issue at the moment in terms of the number of children with additional needs, SEND needs in schools. But they're not just in schools, they're children. So they live in society. They are children with those additional issues, and they have a home life and a social life as well as a life in school. So I think the government programme around family hubs for younger children and the Families First agenda for children who need social support linked to the SEND reforms, there's a whole system. The ideology or the anticipation from the government is that that as a system will support all children earlier. So some children will have those needs at home, and we have in Somerset already integrated our family intervention service, which is our early help service, with our education engagement service, which is a sort of early intervention service in education, to try and identify those children earlier and put that support in earlier, both at home and in a school setting, when children have sort of emotional behavioural needs, which quite often are linked to educational needs or the other way around. So we're getting in earlier there already. Experts at hand is like another layer of that, really, and it's really a resource for schools. So schools quite rightly say we don't have enough access to education psychology, they don't have enough access to speech and language therapists or occupational therapists. So the experts at hand is the government offer to put money into the system to make those roles more available earlier in the system. What we don't yet know, because we don't have the government guidance, is how that is actually expected to work. Because one, there are not surplus education psychologists, speech and language therapists and occupational therapists in the country. There are not people sitting at home thinking, I wish I could get that job when they're qualified. They're all employed, basically, somewhere doing that work. So we need to understand how the government think that's going to work in terms of where are those people going to come from, and what does that look like in terms of the type of support that people can offer. What we think is that we can create that ourselves, which is what we're trying to do for the Year 1 plan in terms of how that support might work. Obviously, there won't be enough for every single school. They're going to have to do it by some sort of cluster arrangement, by geography, by type of school, by type of child, so that actually we can see what level of support we can provide. And as Councillor Nicholson said earlier, it's probably not enough money that the government's giving us to do exactly what's needed for the volume of children who need this resource. So again, we're going to have criteria. We're going to have to say, you know, which children can have access to which resource. How does that work? Does it work on individual need? Does it work by school type? All those things are things to be worked through, currently without the guidance, but having to submit the plan. And once that guidance is actually published, being able to tweak what we're starting to do and starting to deliver to fit it to whatever the guidance that comes through actually says. So in answer to your question, no, it's not a perfect system. The government, I think, has recognised it's not perfect and put in these 3 major reform plans to try and address a whole range of needs in a matrix type way, which will support and address the needs of some of those children with SEND needs earlier, but probably not all, and probably will not address all the social care type issues either that we've got, all the early years issues, but it will address some of them. And it's up to local authorities and partners to work out which needs we prioritise, how we make that work best across the system. And from my perspective, what we've got to do, be really careful about, is not to spread that resource so thin that actually nobody gets a good deal from this. We're going to have to prioritise which groups of children, where and how and when we work with as a system to try and improve those educational and social outcomes, and to have the data available so that we can adapt constantly to differing need, where we've succeeded, where we need to change in different geographical areas as well as in different school systems. So sorry, it's a complicated answer, but I think it's a complicated system.
Thank you. Okay, so I've got Emily, then I've got Andy online, and then hopefully we'll look to find some recommendations, members.
Hello, thank you for this report of such a size. It's been a really interesting morning, and I am a sub, so I may be asking things that have been asked before. I want to take us away from the draft for a moment and take us to the main page of the report and the equality impact duty. I note that armed forces, including serving personnel, families and veterans, have no identified impact. We have 2 not insignificant military bases in Somerset, and I'm not assuming that these impact assessments are bound by the data that's available, as other ones in there have opinions and thoughts that aren't grounded in data. These particular children come and go from schools, and when they have additional needs, that creates additional pressures on both the school that they're in and information being passed from schools to school. Not necessarily a question, but I would be remiss, it would be remiss of me if I didn't bring up that no identified impact, I think is rather sad. And that I think, I'm obviously they're very different cohorts, but that Gypsy and Roma children that may have similar but very different types of moving around and, you know, dysregulation, instability, let alone their actual educational needs, are not mentioned. So that's my first point, and I would like to see that some work could be done on that, even though it's not necessarily relevant to the report. Thank you. And if you have any thoughts, I'd appreciate that. The next thing I would like to ask is, I am assuming, however, probably shouldn't, so I will just check. On page 61 of the draft report, that in the first year, you've got outreach, redeploy and recruit, with a financial tag associated with it. But in year 2 and year 3, although you've got outreach and other words to suggest expansion and commissioning and all those things, recruitment isn't specified. And I know that sounds really silly, but there is a cost to recruiting when people may fall off, they may not be suitable. And, you know, the robustness of whether those are specified elsewhere in the report or elsewhere in other documentation or financial documentation that I've not seen. And my last question is with regard to banding, which I know you're considering looking at and trying to work out whether banding needs changing. I am aware of a situation where assessment at home has not been exactly the same as what would have been assessed once those children who have been at home for some time have ended up in a school placement. And reassessment has caused changes in the cost associated with each individual pupil. Will the banding, the new or reconsidered banding changes, take into account when, of all those children that Amelia pointed out, do actually manage to achieve finding a place, that assessments are considered more suitable in terms of the situation that they're in is one situation and can be assessed in one way, but maybe they're under assessed when it comes to once they're in the setting that they're aiming to get to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I can answer the first two. The third one, I will need to just clarify the question. So just on the equalities impact assessment, so I work with our equalities team and services on drafting this together. So I can say that we've tried very hard to make sure that the equalities impact assessment covered all groups with protected characteristics, and the way we did that was we looked at the data that was available to us, so the needs assessment, and we tried to look at national research where we could find it. Just reflecting on your feedback on armed forces, we couldn't find any local data to support that, but I can go away and look, because I personally, you know, equalities impact assessments are really important and to ensure that everything's included. But you know, if there's national research that we can draw on, we can add that to the EIA and amend it, because it is a known fact that there are particular challenges for that community. So we can take that one away. Just on recruit, yeah, and so I'll come back with it. Anything I find. As an aside. Sure. And so the Gypsy and Roma traveller community, that group was emphasised in the needs assessment as disproportionately likely to have experience special educational needs, and for that reason, that's why we mentioned that group. But we will take that away, because equalities impact assessments should be living, breathing documents, and it's through these kind of conversations that we identify those gaps. So thank you very much for raising that. So on recruitment, we've only been provisionally allocated the funding for this year, and we've only been asked to talk about this year, which is why we're looking at that. We are of course thinking about the wider picture, because we can't just think about this financial year and what's going to happen. It may in many cases take a number of months to action this. So we are thinking about it, but in what we are being asked to submit to DfE, we're only being asked to submit this year's figure. So that's why. And could I just I'm sorry on the banding. Could you just ask that again, just so I'm clear on how to respond?
So it is known that young people can be assessed at home for their placement and put in a specific band or allocated a band, which seems appropriate. They may have been out of education for quite a long time by this point. They are then placed, which is brilliant that there is a place available. And because they are now in a setting in a very different environment, their assessment, their initial assessment, is that basically their need has been under-assessed because they were in a different environment, and that changes the costs associated with that per pupil. And I am interested to know whether those things, especially with the amount of children that are currently out of education, aiming to get back into education, some may be happy educating at home, whether that consideration is going to be taken into account when looking at the banding process and assessment process.
Yes, so children's needs obviously do change, whether they've come from home into a school or just from one school environment to another, or just in the ordinary environment, their needs can change. So yes, there is a process for reviewing those children's needs if their needs appear to change, and schools and parents can ask for that assessment to be reviewed at any point in terms of their additional need and what additional resource they may require.
Okay, Andy, do you want to come in online? Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, apologies for not being there in person. It couldn't be avoided. I'll aim to be there next time. Secondly, of course, I'm hoping that Amelia is okay and that she's been properly supported, because I know this can be quite a tense time for everybody. As far as my question is concerned, I'm not going to hold your time up because Councillor Hunt asked my exact question regarding the 151 officer and his deputy. So there's no need for me to go over that one again.
Thank you for that. And that gives Sławek, who's currently waving at me frantically, the opportunity to come in with a final question. Sławek.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just my question is regarding what Claire was mentioning earlier regarding the need for school placements for the children who are not in education at this stage. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. But what we're seeing within the schools at the moment, there it's a very unprecedented number of consultation which coming to schools. That takes incredibly long time to respond. But also that even if the schools are objecting to the consultation based on not being able to meet needs, those schools are still named. So there is a high risk that for September we will have the named places. The children will be on the school roll, but those places potentially can be breaking down, leading to back again to exclusions and not attendance and so on. So have we mitigated that part of the potential within the plan, and what is the local authority planning to do to support the schools if that happens? And the second one, just very quickly on the back of what the lady said regarding the banding. The schools are requesting change of bands, but often enough, those are rejected as insufficient evidence provided. So what we're seeing is that uplifting the bands currently, it's incredibly challenging and difficult to achieve. Thank you.
So I think the second one was more of a comment than a statement, than a question. So the first question about, oh God, it's gone out of my head now. The first question was about
school placement, consultation.
So school consults in terms of children needing a school place is a standard statutory process. So that will continue. I have looked at that recently, actually, and it is very inefficient in that you're getting very individual requests, aren't you, for children. So at the moment, the team is trying to pull together a meeting with the schools in the next few weeks for special schools and mainstream schools individually with the group of children that might be coming to your school, so that you can have a look at the whole cohort with somebody there to try and make that a better use of time effectively, rather than individual children coming forward. Yes, it is possible that when we have not got sufficient provision for children, and there is not sufficient provision for every child in Somerset to have exactly the placement that they need in a school, we're trying to balance is it better for that child to have a school place to try and put enough support around that child in that school that may not be absolutely ideal, or is it better for that child to be out of school while we wait an undeterminate period to see if a place becomes available for that child? And that's different for every child. And sometimes we'll get that judgment wrong, and we are trying to work with schools about that. And I know school budgets are under huge pressure, and the places for children are under huge pressure. But because we don't have sufficiency, we're trying to get the nearest possible match for children who have the available school places, so that we have most children in a school place in September.
Thank you for that. Okay, most of my questions have been answered. Before I start to summarise, just a couple of points of clarification, please, from me. So, experts at hand. We keep talking about capacity, but then we go on to talk about multi-academy trusts that already have some experts at hand. How is that all going to work with the overlapping? Are we going to be duplicating? Are we saying, this is me paraphrase, are we saying that multi-academy trusts that already have experts or EPs, etc., are going to be better off than our local authority schools? How is that going to work? Or is that going to come out more in the guidance?
Hopefully that will come out more in the guidance. It's a good question, and it's something we're wrestling with.
Okay, so can I ask that one's noted? Because I think that's an important point that we need to go back to, because I want all children in Somerset to have the same opportunities. If we're starting to say that a local academy school that relies on the local authority to provide additional care is potentially being less advantage and be impacted negatively because the multi-academy trust next door already has access to 2 specialist advisors. So that would be an interesting point to seek clarification on.
Chair, can I come in on that?
Go for it.
The guidance that we have got so far, which is very, very limited, does ask us to talk about that equity between settings. And one of the things that it's identified and we've written into what we're planning and the way it's being done is for schools that don't necessarily self-identify that they need help. So we will have some schools that are very good at coming forward and asking for support, others that don't necessarily do that, but there's mechanisms to be able to support in those situations as well.
It's access to support is the other one, yeah. Which I think is important. Okay, governance structure. I'll go back to that. I think I picked that up in the recommendation, but you seem to indicate to me that the Somerset Board, aka the Health and Wellbeing Board, is going to have a pivotal role in the governance. It seemed to be at the top, everything reported that way. And the question there would be achievability for that, because health and wellbeing doesn't necessarily understand education, etc. Did I get that wrong?
So I think the Somerset Board is the overarching board for the whole system, for everybody across Somerset. So it incorporates the Health and Wellbeing Board. It isn't the Health and Wellbeing Board in itself, it's the Health and Wellbeing Board plus. So in terms of having a forum where the most strategic leaders in every element of the local system, not just the local authority, so health, the voluntary sector, etc., are present for things to be presented there by exception, for unblocking, for help effectively when things are not working properly. That is the only forum that we can currently identify has all the strategic leaders in it that we would need to be able to talk to.
Bruce?
Currently, we are under our current legislation, and if you read the SEND Code of Practice, it makes it very clear that the Health and Wellbeing Board that is incorporated in Somerset Board is legally responsible overall for SEND. So therefore, it would be the appropriate place at the moment until there are any changes within the law.
Thank you for that clarification. So I'm going to talk in a minute about governance structure. I think that would be an important point that I would welcome clarification, and I think members would in relation to that. the point, there's not me summing up just yet. There's a couple of points. So the fact that the voice of the child is echoed so well in this is really good, but that has to be continued in everything we do, because that's what we're here for as a committee. And the fact that the working with colleges is also interesting. How that fits in, FE further education fits into this is going to be a really interesting point, because obviously with the report that was announced last week about NEETs and those numbers, that's obviously a thing that, and it comes up regularly when we have conversations about things. Okay, Lee. So what I plan to do then, I think I've got some recommendations, and what I'm going to suggest, I'll put them up on the board in a minute so that we can read through them. What I'm going to suggest that we do, that we agree the outline of them, because the problem is going to be if we start agreeing a full list of recommendations by committee, it could be problematic. But what I will do, I could take it, but what I will be asking you, I think, to do at the end of this is to agree if you're comfortable with the direction of travel, and delegate to the vice chair and myself to finish them up ready for Wednesday. The reason I say that is because what would normally happen would be that our wonderful clerks would be detailing the debate and forming a set of minutes from that, which we could then help feed into the committee, to the executive. The executive members have been here. We haven't got the time to do that, and it would be unfair to ask Jack to lose any more hair about stressing to get something together that quickly. So my suggestion will be that we can accept that most of our points have been covered and fed in. I'll just quickly run through the notes that I had for summing up, and then I'll see if I can get my machine to work to put something up onto the big board. So we identified this as a massive, complex plan. The concern about increased demand, continual process and listening is being fed in. Feedback from parents has been added, and what we look to do is add scrutiny recommendations so that it goes forward to executive. There was lots of debate about experts at hand and the recruitment and the achievability of that. And I think one of the points that I wanted to chuck into that is we might want to consider, obviously we've talked about recruitment of a SEND legal specialist. It's been something we failed upon. The report makes so. We might want to, I would suggest in our recommendation, highlight our concern about potentially recruitment of a specialist being prioritised along with the experts at hand, because of for that being there. We talked about the transition from DMP to SEND reform with the finance side about that. And again, we talked about delivery risk and plan approval. There was a conversation about potential impacts of withdrawal financing over previous years that may have contributed to some of the position we find ourselves in. We also talked about, which I think is an important point to remember, is how we should be looking at our current cohort as one body and those coming into the process as another. We need to be putting early intervention into place so that we can hopefully prevent or reduce the numbers coming in, but we cannot forget the fact the numbers of those already in the process and dealing with them as they go through. It was reminded that we needed elected member involvement, and that's an interesting point as well, because again, we're going to talk about the member oversight panel. And one of the things I'm going to suggest from the chair, because I have had conversations with her, is that we need to strengthen member involvement in that. I think the 3 volunteers that put themselves forward may be realising the deluge that they're being put under, and some additional support from members with from different committees would potentially be helpful for that, because we're putting a lot on them. 151 officer holding things up, we'll deal with that. EHCP completions. We had a conversation, I think is an important point to reiterate, is that potentially the need for a special school in the east of the county, and it would be helpful maybe if we can put some pressure on to move that forward. The financial amount of resource coming from the government may not be able to meet the full expectations. Prioritising children, there was a concern about the impact, equality's impact assessment, and the one that we talked about there as well was data sharing and putting in place processes that we can use that effectively. Here we go. Let's see if Lee can get this to work. That you'll see yourself first. There we go. Let's have a look. Forgive the green. Some of you may or may not realise I am dyslexic, and I've found that green helps me read a little bit better. So let's see if that goes. So I'll read through them if it's easier than to do. And this is just a format that we'll put. So the executive supports the submission of the SEND reform plan, subject to strengthening financial clarity, including clear modelling, assumptions and contingency planning, and notes the high level of risk associated with this. That's us basically saying we agree with where we go, but you need to look at the risk that's coming. That the executive, I think one of these points is already clarified because I've written it as we were going. The executive ensures clear ICB accountability, including a named statutory signatory, defined financial contributions, which we didn't really mention, but that's something that is relevant to us sharing the load, and transparent monitoring arrangements between partners. We were talking there. 3 is that the executive requires a detailed workforce and delivery plan, including recruitment timelines and mitigation for capacity gaps, and that they consider experts at hand and SEND legal capacity is included as a monitored priority. If I'm going too far. 4 is that the executive strengthens the evidence base, including measurable baseline targets and the alignment with the deficit management plan into the SEND reform plan. That one we could probably change it a little bit of. And 5, that the executive ensures robust evidence of co-production and ongoing engagement beyond submission, perhaps considering a "you said, we did" summary, showing how feedback has influenced the plan, including the voice of the child. 6, that executive commits to regular reporting to Scrutiny through the member oversight panel, including integrated monitoring of finance, demand, workforce performance, outcomes and delivery milestones, supported by a dashboard with baselines and targets. I probably, that's my words. I think the idea behind it is there we can sort out the wording if it's a problem. Bear with me, I'm just getting near the bottom. So. And then 7 is that the executive considers publishing a simplified governance map showing roles, responsibilities and reporting lines across all SEND related boards. I will share with this after the meeting, members, in case I've missed anything that you did. But is there anything that jumps out? Ruth, thank you.
I know I'm on this side today. But for me, I think we need to just be very careful with this because we're getting the SEND reform plan and the wider SEND system slightly muddled. Maybe we just need to split them out in some of the recommendations. For example, the one that you've talked about, the workforce development and the expert at hand and the SEND legal capacity, they're 2 different lots of funding. So I just think for clarity, it'd be helpful to split them out. So
thank you.
I agree 100%, but
that's some of the reason why I noticed that I rushed some of the wording because it's hard to write recommendations while we're in the meeting as well to make sure but if we're the point will be I'm happy to have the conversation maybe just quickly afterwards, and the vice chair and I will I think the dashboard is the important bit. We need to be able to see what's going on, and the bit I've realised is not in there is the risk matrix. That's something that I'd probably add to the publishing element to the. Okay, members, are we happy to delegate the responsibility of the final wording to the vice chair and myself? Are there any other points or issues? Thank you all very much for your time. Meeting closed.